The Oort Cloud. Comets are some of the most brilliant spectacles that we can observe from Earth. These balls of ice and minerals often have brilliant trails that can be seen by terrestrial observers if such a comet passes close enough to Earth. But have you ever wondered where those comets came from and where they go when they complete their orbit around the Earth? This is a mystery that scientists are still mostly unable to answer. Some comets with shorter orbits closer to our solar system are believed to be from icy interstellar objects called scattered disks. However, this only accounts for a small fraction of known comets. The origins of those with longer period orbits, as well as some short period orbit comets, like the famous Halley's Comet, are not nearly as clear. There is one plausible theory that is thought to be the genesis of all these long period comets. The genesis is known as the Oort Cloud, named after Dutch astronomer Jan Oort. Oort expanded upon and corrected the theories of Estonian astronomer Ernst Öpik, and determined that because of the sheer amount of volatile elements and chemicals that exist on comets, that they had to have formed in some sort of cloud of material on the outer rims of the solar system. The loose gravitational force of the Sun would keep these icy objects in this cloud-like formation. When an object comes close enough to the inner rim of the cloud, it is pulled by the gravity of the Sun towards our solar system, thus getting launched into orbit. Some comets, such as Halley's Comet, get stuck within a close orbit of our solar system, thanks to the happenstance of the gravitational forces, and become short-period orbits of our solar system. Others, such as the Hale-Bopp Comet, can take thousands of years to complete an orbit. All of these objects, and billions and trillions more, exist, supposedly within the Oort Cloud. They theorize this cloud is actually made up of the remnants of the protoplanetary disk that surrounded our Sun until it formed into the planets we have today. Matter that did not get pulled together enough to create planets. Scientists estimate that the Oort Cloud could be 5,000 to 100,000 AU thick, or about a light year in thickness. There's that much space that just has floating ice remnants ready to become comets, if it exists. The big catch here is that scientists have no idea if the Oort Cloud actually exists. On their official NASA website, they refer to the Oort Cloud as scientists' best guess as to where so many comets come from. This cloud is so far from Earth and the rest of our solar system that we currently have no way to detect its presence. The closest satellite we have to the Oort Cloud is Voyager 1, which is currently travelling at nearly 1 million miles per day towards the location of the Oort Cloud. Unfortunately, because of how far the Oort Cloud is, Voyager 1 won't reach the very beginning of it for another 300 years. If it were to try and travel all the way through, it would take approximately 30,000 years to reach the end of the outer cloud. However, we won't ever get to see it get that close, as Voyager 1 will lose power and contact with Earth by 2025, meaning we will have absolutely no way to know what is out past the point we lose contact. Until we find a way to get a satellite to travel far and fast, and that is strong enough to communicate with Earth, we will likely continue to be in the dark about the existence of the Oort Cloud. Signals from deep space. The Earth is constantly being barraged with light radiation from all over the universe. Using radio wave observatories, such as the Very Large Array in New Mexico or Merlin in the United Kingdom, astronomers are constantly studying the sky, listening to these emissions from across the universe. While many wavelengths help us decipher and uncover the universe around us, one immensely powerful type of radio wave emission is almost completely shrouded in mystery. These are known as fast radio bursts, or FRBs for short. FRBs are radio waves that last only a few milliseconds, but that have extremely energetic radio frequencies. These range from 500 MHz up to 7 GHz in energy, or about 500 million times the energy emitted from our own Sun. FRBs originate far away from Earth, with most points of origin being billions of light years away. Because of this massive distance, scientists are unable to identify just what generates these massive signals from deep space. Being able to understand the origins of these massive, far-travelling light waves could unlock incredible secrets and knowledge about our universe. But without methods of detection, we are left completely in the dark. just what might be causing giant bursts of energy. Many scientists speculate that FRBs have natural origins from high-energy celestial bodies that are far-flung from our own galaxy. FRBs are most frequently observed in singular bursts, meaning that whatever they came from experienced a massive surge in energy that emitted the signal initially. Such an extreme event would theoretically be generated by collisions of massive objects, such as neutron stars colliding with black holes, supernovas, or other neutron stars. Although such a scenario is possible naturally, scientists currently have no way of testing if this is the case, or if something much more complicated and advanced might be at play. Scientists theorize that there could be a constant barrage of FRBs actually hitting our planet every day, but we just don't have the technological instruments to detect them. And we are still learning new things about FRBs every year. In 2015, McGill University graduate student Paul Schultz made the groundbreaking discovery that FRBs could repeat. He pinpointed the signal FRB 121102, which had first been detected in 2012, confirming for the first time that FRBs have the possibility to reoccur. This opened up a world of new possibilities for the origins of FRBs, including some that may involve alien intelligence. Some scientists believe that FRBs could have artificial points of origin, created by a super-intelligent alien species who have figured out how to harness much higher energies than anyone on Earth could control. In March of 2017, scientists from the Harvard University released a theory that said that FRBs might be energy leaks from giant planet-sized transmitters. By creating a powerful solar array 2 times the size of Earth, aliens could harness the power of nearby stars and focus that energy towards huge intergalactic solar sailors. These solar sailors could theoretically carry large numbers of passengers on rapid intergalactic routes to other stars, planets, and potentially even galaxies. It's astonishing to think that FRBs may just be the remnant energy of an intergalactic superhighway. But until astronomers are able to detect precise origins for these signals, we as humans will be left to speculate on this celestial mystery. Dark matter and dark energy. One of the most well-known mysteries of the universe, at least by name, is that of dark matter and dark energy, the most elusive substances in the universe, which we've talked about before. We are only aware of the presence of this phenomena because of their effects on gravity. Otherwise, we have no idea what these two things are at all. Since many people are aware of this mystery, I want to take a second to debunk some of the most common misconceptions about dark matter and dark energy. First and foremost, dark energy and dark matter are not the same thing. Dark matter is all the matter that scientists are unable to detect through current technological means. This includes both baryonic or normal matter that might be difficult for scientists to detect, and non-baryonic matter, which is matter that isn't composed of baryons or atomic particles. However, baryonic matter is thought to make up only a small fraction of what dark matter actually is. Most dark matter is currently completely unobservable and thought to be non-baryonic, as it does not interact with known physical particles and radiation the way baryonic matter is observed to. Many believe this matter is composed of WIMPs, or weakly interacting massive particles. Those are proton-sized particles with extremely dense masses that supposedly hardly interact with any other particles around them, making them difficult to detect. According to astronomical observations, dark matter makes up roughly 72% of the universe, yet all of this matter is completely undetectable. Dark energy is the supposed energy that has increased the expansion of the universe, and is thought to comprise the majority of our universe, making up approximately 68% of it. Unlike the name might suggest, dark energy is not something tangible like electricity, but more like a force such as gravity. Unlike dark matter, which is a bit better defined, dark energy is only known to be the driver of the accelerating expansion of our universe. In 1998, the Hubble Space Telescope made this observation while observing a supernova from early in the universe's life. Astronomers realized that the universe back then was expanding much slower than it is observed to be expanding today, which at the time was a completely astounding result. It completely contradicts our known natural laws of physics, suggesting that this special type of energy is able to operate outside of those normal bounds, or even that our theory of gravity may be inaccurate. Aside from this information, scientists are almost completely in the dark about the properties or the actual existence of dark energy. Scientists cannot even begin to make headway on what dark energy is, because there is no current way to discern its existence. With so many questions to answer, how are astronomers trying to chip away at the problem of dark energy and dark matter? In the case of dark matter, scientists are trying to utilize groundbreaking detection methods that search for minuscule dense particles. In November 2017, researchers at Brown University unveiled a new experiment for detection that involves utilizing superfluid helium to detect these elusive particles that give off astronomically tiny amounts of energy. If successful, scientists may be able to take their first crack at what exactly makes up dark matter of the universe. Dark energy proves to be more difficult, as it's not necessarily a substance that can be observed. Scientists, at best, can run tests on their theories using calculations and educated speculation. Some believe dark energy to be a kind of fifth element, or quintessence, being a fifth fundamental force alongside strong interaction, weak interaction, gravity, and electromagnetism. Others think the force points to a cosmological constant, as originally theorized by Albert Einstein. Whatever the answer may be, it's rather daunting to comprehend that the universe that we are currently able to see and interact with only accounts for a small 5% of the universe. It makes you appreciate our existence on this earth just a little bit more. Is our universe a simulation? Simulation theory is the idea that our world, or even our entire universe, exists inside of a simulation, and that none of us are truly real. Since its popularization from the movie The Matrix, society has often been fascinated with the possibility that we live inside a simulation. While it may have started out as a science fiction, a multitude of scientific studies have begun to take this question. This endeavour has proved to be rather controversial, as evidence for and against this theory of simulated existence has piled up over the years. So for now, we will lay out what we have learned and leave formulating the answers to you. In the case of our universe being a simulation, scientists have made a number of groundbreaking discoveries that open up the possibility that our universe is in some way simulated by a higher power. In 2012, Professor Silas Bean from the University of Bonn in Germany unearthed the similarities between the properties of a simulation and the properties of particles in our own observed universe. Bean says that Greisen, Zataspin, Kuzmin cutoff illustrates a fundamental limit on the energy that particles can have, which would have to be the case for simulated particles. With a substantial amount of documentation of this phenomena, Bean believes that this could be a piece in the puzzle for revealing the universe as a simulated environment. On March 7, 2015, a debate was hosted by Neil deGrasse Tyson at the American Museum of Natural History in New York to discuss the possibility of the universe being a simulation. During this debate, Professor James Gates from the University of Maryland presented astounding findings regarding the simulation of the universe. While studying the mathematical equations that make up our current understanding of string theory, Gates found what appeared to be computer codes within these equations. According to Gates, this was a special kind of computer code that corrects errors that happen within computer processing, and are a fundamental part of the code of internet browsers today. The presence of these codes was shocking in the midst of superstring theory equations, because it suggested that within the fabric of our very universe, within the vibrating strings that supposedly regulate it all, there exists computerized codes that keep things in check. Since the discovery of these codes, numerous other studies have unearthed more within string theory mathematical equations. This is some of the most compelling evidence to date that our universe might indeed be a simulation. For the most part, past arguments against the idea that we live in a simulation have mostly been philosophical or metaphysical. This was until October of 2017, when a team of Oxford physicians used quantum physics to suggest otherwise. Hailed by some as confirmation that the universe was conclusively not a simulation, two theoretical physicists attempted to simulate the motion of quantum systems using a method called quantum Monte Carlo. This is essentially a method of simulating complex particle interactions by using random samples of the motions in these systems, since these motions are too minute to simulate directly and exactly. Their experiment found that as more particles were placed into the system, the simulation became increasingly unworkable. So unworkable in fact, that only a few hundred simulated electrons would have taken the computing power of more than all atoms of the universe combined. Thus, because the computing power needed becomes exponentially greater as particles are added to the simulation, they concluded that the universe could not be simulated. Since the release of this study, many have pointed out that if our world were simulated, we would not be able to necessarily replicate the environment and computing power needed to duplicate such a simulation. One of the physicists himself admitted that the computing power of the universe simulating us could be much more vast than our own universe. So although we have found the bounds of simulations within our own universe, we still do not have the conclusive idea as to whether or not our universe is simulated. And as we crawl deeper into the rabbit hole, we may become less and less certain if we exist in a simulation or not. What do you think? Intergalactic Voids. Our universe is composed of pockets of energy and space, dictated by the way matter expanded after the Big Bang. Through millions of years, certain areas became extremely dense with baryonic and non-baryonic matter, creating galaxies and galaxy clusters, while other areas become much more devoid of material. It is this natural process of random expansion that has created what are known as cosmic voids. In a cosmic void, matter of any kind is much less densely concentrated than the average area of the universe. The Millennium Simulator, run at the Max Planck Institute of Astrophysics in Germany, provides us with a simulated map of the universe's energy and matter distribution. Paired with studies and observations, one of cosmic background radiation, scientists have been able to discover these supervoids. These voids take up astronomical amounts of space and occupy the majority of the volume of the universe. But what may surprise you is that we in the Milky Way galaxy are living inside the largest supervoid known to science. The KBC void was first discovered in 2013 by astronomers Ryan Keenan, Amy Barger and Lennox Cowie, thus granting its name. Through further study, the KBC void was observed to be a massive 2 billion light-years in size, larger than any other supervoid observed in our universe so far. This means where we are living right now is particularly devoid of energy compared to most of the rest of the universe. This is an area where even dark matter is relatively absent. But why could that be? Many questions arise about our supervoid that are still completely unexplained. Scientists are still unsure exactly why our region of the universe is so devoid of energy. The matter-power spectrum, as described by physicist Victor T. Toth, gives us a general understanding of how matter ends up distributed less densely in voids, but does nothing to explain the reasons why our cosmic neighbourhood is mostly vacant. It is especially curious that an area so devoid of matter would also be the only known place in the universe for life to have developed. Though maybe this explains why other stars in our cosmic neighbourhood have no signs of life. Are we the loneliest life forms in the universe? It could possibly be so. While questions plague our understanding of our place in the universe, cosmic voids might end up holding more answers to the secrets of the universe than we ever thought possible. The complete lack of matter throughout the majority of the KBC void makes it much easier to detect when matter actually is present. This means that if we were to try and find some way to detect dark matter in nature, there is almost no better place to be running those kinds of experiments than in our own supervoid. Our supervoid may also help clarify what dark energy is, as we can learn a lot about the way our universe expands by observing the behaviour on the rims of our galactic void. In a universe full of mysteries, it's almost reassuring to know that one of the best ways of finding answers might be starting in the void. The giant ground sloth. Standing as tall as an elephant, weighing 4 tons and equipped with huge claws, the ground sloth is a far cry from its slow modern ancestor. These huge shaggy beasts had a wide range, living throughout much of North and South America. And although the ground sloth was a herbivore, its huge bulk and wickedly sharp claws meant it would have commanded respect from even the fiercest predators. It's believed to have gone extinct around 10,000 years ago. However, in the dense Amazon, sightings persist of a strange creature locals called the Mapinguari, described as a massive, furry creature with huge claws and a vicious attitude. Could it be possible that the population of giant ground sloths survived the Ice Age in South America, one of their last strongholds, and now live in the near impenetrable depths of the Amazon? What do you think? The Shortfaced Bear. The largest land predator alive today is the formidable polar bear, standing up to 10 feet tall and weighing more than 800 pounds. It's the king of its domain. However, it's a teddy bear in comparison to its ancient cousin, standing 13 feet on its hind legs, weighing just shy of a ton, and with a mouth big enough to fit a human skull inside with room to spare. Arctodus, or as it's better known, the short-faced bear, is the biggest meat-eating mammal ever to walk on land. Brutish bear roamed Ice Age North America, hunting down bison and horses, and even chased off other predators from their kills. Although scientists speculate it died out around 10,000 BC, there are strange sightings which could suggest Arctodus made it through. Native American legends have always told of bears much bigger than the usual that cannot be harmed by spears and bows. In 1854, Inuit hunters in northern Canada shot a huge bear unlike anything they'd seen before. They contacted naturalist Robert McFarlane, and after examining the skin and skull of the specimen, McFarlane found that its fur was light yellow, unlike the brown and black bears of the region. Its skull was also unlike any bear he had ever seen, leading McFarlane to declare the specimen as a new species. Sadly, the remains are too old and degraded to be examined conclusively today, so the true identity of McFarlane's bear still remains uncertain. The moa. Mammals were not the only family to grow to huge sizes during the Ice Age. Hidden away on the isolated island of New Zealand was the moa, a gigantic flightless bird that stood 12 feet tall and weighed more than a horse. Despite its imposing size, the moa was in fact a peaceful plant eater, and this was inevitably its downfall, as when settlers from Polynesia arrived, they found the slow, gentle moa an easy target, leading them to be hunted to extinction around 12,000 years ago. However, rumours persist of the moa's existence on the island, with locals reporting strange bird calls unlike any ever heard before, and huge three-toed tracks have allegedly been found in the dense forests. The most compelling piece of evidence comes in the form of a 1993 photograph taken by hotel owner Paddy Freeney. Freeney claims that he and two others were hiking in the mountains of Arthur's Pass when they spotted the huge bird standing next to a stream. After spotting the group, the moa fled, but Freeney was able to take what he claims was a hasty photograph of the bird running away. The photo itself is unfortunately too blurry to be easily identified. But what do you think? Do you think somewhere out there the moa still exists, quietly getting on with its life away from human civilization? Meg Alania. Australia is well known for its vast array of unique wildlife, like the platypus or echidna. But during the Pleistocene era, the animals were even stranger, and they all lived in fear of one creature, the Meg Alania. Nothing like Meg Alania had walked the earth since the days of the dinosaurs. A gigantic monitor lizard, bigger than a crocodile, with a mouthful of razor-sharp teeth, lined with venom that stalked the deserts of Australia. In fact, the Meg Alania was so terrifying that it's still talked about to this day in Aboriginal folklore. So imagine if this living nightmare had survived until the present. European settlers recorded sightings of massive lizards as soon as they arrived on the Australian continent, and in 1890, newspapers reported an Australian village was besieged by a massive unknown reptile which killed livestock. But much more recent sightings have been reported. For example, in 1970, a surveyor in Alice Springs reported that while doing his job, he saw what he at first believed to be a large log suddenly stand up and skulk off into the undergrowth. In 1979, Australian cryptozoologist Rex Gilroy was contacted by a cattle farmer who claimed he saw a lizard in excess of 20 feet long on his property. Plaster casts were made of its tracks, and Gilroy also related a story that a former Australian Special Ops soldier who wished to remain anonymous had told him. While on a training exercise in the rainforests of the Normanby Range, his unit came upon a dead cow which had been dragged into the jungles and ripped to pieces. All around its body were huge lizard tracks up to 2 feet across. The Sabertooth Dekat. Arguably the most iconic of all Ice Age creatures, the Sabertooth Dekat, or Smilodon, were killing machines, huge, fast, and massively powerful. The Sabertooth Dekat would pounce upon prey, wrestle it down, and then put its infamous 11-inch fangs to lethal use, severing the jugular vein and windpipe in one ruthless bite. Truly a fearsome beast, the Sabertooth family conquered both South and North America, up until the very end of the Ice Age. The locals of the Anidi Plateau in Chad, Africa, tell tales of a big cat unlike the others that live there. They say it's much bigger, with dark fur and black stripes, and most telling of all, its fangs protrude from its mouth. In 1910, French missionaries traversing the Bemigo River reported that one of their party was attacked and killed by what they could only describe as a water tiger, and in 1920, not far from where the incident occurred, hunter Marcel Harley came across a dead hippo that was covered in massive slash wounds. Most recently of all, in 1975, while on a hunting expedition on the plateau, Christian Leno heard a strange roaring coming from a nearby cave. His local guide claimed it was the sound of the fabled big cat, and he refused to carry on the hunt. Is it possible that the apex predator of the Ice Age has survived in this remote corner of Africa, cut off from the rest of the world? What do you think? Sombath Somphone. For over 20 years, Sombath Somphone was a respected international figure, helping create new methods of sustainable farming and agricultural practices, while teaching students about the importance of eco-friendly living. Since he returned to Lao People's Democratic Republic after the end of the Vietnam War, Somphone had received numerous awards and distinctions for his work to improve the quality of life, not just in Laos, but around the world. Not only that, but he managed to stay out of politics throughout his career in community development, appealing to wide audiences regardless of political affiliation, a rare feat for someone so global and a major reason why his mysterious disappearance makes such little sense. On the evening of December the 15th, 2012, Somphone was driving his jeep through the Vientiane, Laos, when he was pulled over on the side of a highway by police. The police approach his vehicle and talk for a few moments. Somphone then exits his jeep and joins the officers. A few seconds pass before a man in black arrives on a motorcycle and rushes to team up with the police. The man in black then gets in the jeep and drives away. Not long after, a man in white appears and waits at the scene. A pickup truck arrives and the man in white hops in, along with two other people, including Somphone. Another motorcyclist behind the outpost appears and talks to police, before seemingly firing a few rounds of ammunition. The truck then leaves while police check the abandoned motorcycle. The man in white comes back and drags it out of the frame, clearing the scene. It was the last time Somphone would ever be seen again. Soon after the CCTV footage was captured, the government swiftly denied any responsibility in the kidnapping of Sombath Somphone. However, most prominent governing officials of international countries weren't convinced. Many global facticians pushed officials to contribute as many resources as possible to find Somphone, but urgent action was never carried out. Even prominent American politicians such as Hillary Clinton and John Kerry voiced their concern for the well-being of Somphone and their anger at the lack of resources spent in the search. Because the CCTV footage was never officially made public, no detailed investigation into the video have been announced. All we can do is speculate why the police were so interested in Somphone, or if they were truly police at all. The man in black and the man in white also add a bizarre twist, as their actions seemed quite calculated and planned out. Somphone was a simple man who did only good for his community and nation. He had zero reasons to fear for his life, made no enemies, and worked to sustain peace. The only reasonable explanation is the people who kidnapped Somphone were agents of chaos, devoted to removing a symbol of good that was Sombath Somphone. Let's hope that one day the Leo government will commit a proper investigation to uncover the truth. The disappearance of Corey McKeague. In the early morning hours of September the 24th, 2016, Royal Air Force Regiment gunner Corey McKeague went out drinking with some friends in Bury Street, Edwards, UK. He drove into town with the intention of leaving his car overnight and ended up in the Flex nightclub, which he was seen leaving alone sometime after midnight. The doorman of the club claimed he asked Corey to leave due to how drunk he was, and Corey left without issue. From there, he wandered to Mamma Mia's restaurant, his well-known favourite takeout. He was seen sometime between 1:15 and 1:30 am. It would be about 2 hours later, at 3:25 am, that Corey was captured on CCTV footage walking down Brent Govell Street into the Horseshoe area. He was alone, and police concluded that he had been sleeping in the doorway of an unidentified establishment before awakening and wandering off. This would sadly become the last time anyone saw Corey. Authorities believe that he had no intentions of walking the 10 miles back to the RAF Honington base where he lived. However, Corey's friends did mention that it was common for Corey to drive into town, grab some food, and sleep wherever he could on weekends. Corey was reported missing on Monday, September the 26th, when he failed to report for work. Police established that Corey's mobile phone had travelled along the A1101 corridor up north to Barton Mills the morning of his disappearance. The trip only took 28 minutes, meaning Corey couldn't have made it while walking. Investigators drove up and down the road where a bin lorry had made its rounds that morning, thinking the phone had ended up in the trash. It was either switched off or damaged at around 8 am, but unfortunately it was never found. It was also established that in the area in which Corey was last seen walking into was a cul-de-sac containing multiple wheelie bins. Because CCTV footage never captured Corey leaving the Horseshoe, police thought Corey may have fallen asleep in one of the bins and become trapped when a bin lorry picked it up the next morning. This would explain the faster movement of his mobile phone, but would also lead investigators to believe Corey had then been subsequently killed by either the garbage compactor or landfill incinerator. For months on end, police scoured railroads, lorry routes, and even spent millions of pounds searching landfills. They never found any DNA evidence or partial remains of Corey or his phone. However, authorities say that it would be almost impossible to pinpoint such evidence in landfills, contaminated with other human DNA, and vast amounts of rubbish. But the lorry landfill death is the popular hypothesis of most researchers. Corey's family has its doubts, however. It's important to note that the CCTV cameras at the last sighting of Corey turned off at noon the day of the disappearance, and were never checked for the night's footage before it expired. Thus Corey could have fallen asleep in the cul-de-sac and left the next afternoon. In fact, one of the people seen leaving the area on CCTV footage in the late morning was wearing coloured shorts that were similar to ones that Corey had worn earlier on his final day. Other theories suggest there was a third party involved in Corey's disappearance, possibly picking up in his stupor and taking him who knows where. It might sound strange for a military man to be kidnapped, but there were some parallels to an attempted kidnapping at the nearby RAF Marham base in July. Everyone involved with the case decided that Corey would not have voluntarily went AWOL, and he was in good mental standing with his girlfriend, his friends, and the fact that his bank account and social media accounts were never changed after his disappearance. However, police won't rule out the possibility he got into a stranger's car that morning for a ride, and ended up with the wrong people at the wrong time. In the end, it's impossible to confirm what exactly happened to Corey McKeague. While the landfill theory makes sense, it's crazy to think, with all of the money and manpower involved, not a single speck of DNA was recovered. Corey truly vanished without a trace, and hopefully someday something will come out that will lead us to a definitive answer. The disappearance of Local Schindelman. Local Schindelman seemed like an average teenage adult. He performed well throughout school, played football for a year at Washington State University, and kept himself out of trouble. However, Logan's life was anything but normal. His father, a Saudi Arabian native, met his mother during a business trip to the Pacific Northwest. They had a short romantic fling, but his father knew he couldn't reroute his life, and went back home to the Middle East. Logan's mother, unwilling to sacrifice her education to be a full-time mum, let Logan's grandmother adopt both he and his half-sister so she could attend college in Seattle and start a new life. So Logan grew up with his grandmother, but always felt uneasy about his parents' background and experienced an identity crisis when he hit puberty at a young age. After discovering college wasn't right for him, Logan moved back in with his grandmother and worked odd jobs around Tumwater, Washington, before leaving for work on Friday morning of May the 19th, 2016. 19-year-old Logan had a peculiar conversation with his grandmother. He talked about how he was at a crossroad in his life, unsure of his passions and nervous about something. His grandmother mentioned her grandson was unusually confident in his actions, but that morning seemed like he was on a mission, and that he had an epiphany. Avoiding any details, his grandmother said their conversation would continue that evening, after both of them returned from work. However, that conversation never happened, as Logan failed to return from work and hasn't been seen since. When Logan never came home on the evening of the 19th, his grandmother tracked his phone, and saw the last ping was located around Olympia, so she assumed Logan was just visiting his mother. But when Saturday morning came, and Logan was still nowhere to be found, she attempted to report him missing to the police. Unfortunately, the small police department in Tumwater was closed for the weekend, and she had to wait until Monday morning. The police then underwent an investigation and discovered some bewildering evidence that occurred over the weekend. It was soon revealed that while the missing person report was filed on the 23rd, Logan's black 1996 Chrysler Sebring had been impounded on May the 20th without notice, the day after his initial disappearance. Upon investigation, police reported that the car had been found parked at mile marker 91 along Interstate 5 southbound, between Logan's hometown of Tumwater and Maytown. Inside the car were groceries, Logan's cell phone, and his wallet full of cash and credit cards. Eyewitness reports placed Logan near to where his car was found throughout the day on the 20th. One woman claims she saw Logan with two Caucasian men standing outside of the Sebring, parked off the road at exit 95. The same woman then says she saw the car in the same spot on her way home, this time with the hood popped and completely void of passengers. The first of the two strange men was described as having shoulder-length blonde hair and a flannel shirt. The second was about 6 feet tall, sporting a blonde bowl cut, a tank top, and jean shorts that were too small. The police were able to compose a sketch of the second suspect, and the result is quite unsettling. Other sightings of Logan's car place it back at mile marker 91, where it was eventually found, including one truck driver's report that the car swerved across the entire highway with no one in the driver's seat. But when it veered off on the curb, the truck driver saw a man with red or brown hair jump out of the car and run off into the woods. Search and rescue combed through the woods surrounding these areas of the highway, but found no shred of evidence. Overall, there were very few leads in the case. Logan had a tense relationship with his sister's ex-boyfriend, but he was ruled out after passing a polygraph test. He had no other well-known friends or enemies, but his unstable emotional and mental state suggested that he may have left on his own accord. The biggest pushback to this theory, however, was that Logan had left both his cell phone and money in his car, leaving himself without communication. Another possibility is Logan ran off to be with his mother, where Logan's grandmother had last tracked his cell phone on the night of the 19th. In addition, Logan's personal Facebook page was last updated on May the 27th, a week after his disappearance, with a check-in at Olympia Regional Airport. How he accessed Facebook, or if it was Logan himself, is still unknown. As of 2018, there are no new updates or leads in the investigation. However, the two men seen with Logan are still very much considered as the prime suspects. So if anyone in the Pacific Northwest area has any information regarding the police sketch of man number 2, then please reach out to the proper authorities. The disappearance of Yingying Jiang. On a normal summer afternoon in June of 2017, Chinese Academy of Sciences scholar Yingying Jiang, attempted to board a transit bus in Urbana, Illinois to travel to an off-campus apartment complex and sign a new lease. She texted a real estate agent at 1:39 p.m, saying that she would be late, arriving around 2 p.m. She got off the bus at 1:52 p.m. to board her connecting shuttle, but was unable to board as she was on the wrong side of the street. Zhang then walked a couple of blocks to another bus stop right outside of a broadcast studio. It was here at 2 p.m. that CCTV footage captured a black Saturn Astra pass by Jiang, only to turn around a few minutes later and pull up alongside the curb where she was standing at 2:03 p.m. After a moment of undecipherable conversation, Jiang gets in the vehicle and it drives away. It appears on one more security camera and disappears. To date, it's the last known sighting of Yingying Jiang. At around 2:38 p.m, the real estate agent messaged Jiang regarding their meeting and never received a reply. Jiang's roommate, aware of her errands that day, began to worry, and at 9:24 p.m. that evening alerted a college professor who filed an official missing persons report. Authorities were quick to study the CCTV footage from that day and tracked 18 similar Saturn Astras registered in the area. One of those matched was linked to Brendan Allen Christensen, a former PhD student at the university and owner of a Saturn Astra with a sunroof and cracked hubcap, matching those featured in the CCTV footage. Christensen was questioned, but claimed he didn't remember his actions during the time of Jiang's disappearance, saying he was probably home asleep or playing video games. A few days after the initial interview, forensics inspected Christensen's car and found the passenger side appeared to have been cleaned to a more diligent extent than the other vehicle doors. This led to a second interview, where Christensen admitted that he had given an anonymous Asian woman a ride, but it was cut short when he accidentally took a wrong turn and the woman had panicked, requesting to get out. After this confession, officials arrested Christensen and seized all of his personal items, including phones and computers. The police then found internet history on his cell phone, leading to the sexual fetish website FetLife, including a forum entitled Abduction 101. Authorities also claimed they had audio recordings of Christensen saying he had brought Xing back to his apartment against her will, and that she had resisted the kidnapping and attempted to fight back. Where these audio recordings came from, or what he exactly said, is unknown and haven't been released to the public. However, it was enough for police to charge Christensen with kidnapping Jiang, and it was theorised she was no longer alive. Presently, Christensen's trial has been delayed through long court processes, and no new information has arisen regarding the location or official announcement of Jiang's fate. Jiang's family stays hopeful that she could still be alive, but with Christensen's continued plea of innocence, her whereabouts remain a mystery. It's quite possible that when an official hearing takes place and the total bank of evidence against Christensen is revealed, an answer will be given. But until then, the search for Jiang continues. The disappearance of Tammy Kingery. This last case is quite perplexing, so listen closely. Tammy Kingery lived a normal life in Edgefield County, South Carolina, with her husband Park and their 3 children. She was a veteran nurse at a local nursing home and had a close circle of friends, but not all was what it seemed. According to associates of Tammy, her relationship with Park was quite strained, resulting in extramarital affairs and episodes of severe depression, including multiple attempts at suicide. The days leading up to the incident were especially tough on Tammy, as she complained of physical pain and insomnia and missed several days of work, which was out of character for her. Tammy's 2 sisters, part of her close friend group, encouraged her to see a doctor, so she scheduled an appointment for September the 21st, 2014. Unfortunately, the appointment never came to fruition. On 7 a.m. on September the 20th, Tammy left her work as normal. When she arrived, her co-workers noticed that she was agitated about something. Her voice was raised, and she kept checking her blood pressure. Her peers finally convinced her to seek help, and she called her husband to pick her up. He took her home, leaving her car at work, and she immediately went to bed. Park then left her in bed and left the house at 10 a.m. with their 2 sons to run some errands. Their daughter was still at a friend's house from the night before. This was the last time Tammy was seen. When Park and the boys returned home, they found the family dog outside and all the doors locked. When they went inside, the family found a handwritten note from Tammy, reading "Gone for a walk, be back soon, love you." Park knew something was wrong immediately and figured Tammy walked back to the hospital to get her car. He then drove the route she would have taken but found nothing. Park called his daughter and had her and her friend look about the town, and recruited his sons and mother-in-law to check the thick woods surrounding their home. At 2 p.m, when nothing had been found, the police were called and a massive search went underway. Police were unable to find anything unusual in the Kingery residence, besides the fact that Tammy left her phone, wallet, purse and keys behind. This baffled experts, as all the doors could only be locked from the outside. It also muddled the idea that Tammy left on her own accord, seeing as though she wouldn't have been able to drive, call for help or spend money. Police dogs were also unable to catch Tammy's scent in the surrounding woods, further expanding the mystery. When authorities checked her phone, they found 2 different anonymous males engaging in romantic conversation. However, both were investigated and cleared. There are a couple of unanswered clues surrounding the disappearance, the first of which is an old abandoned shack found in the nearby woods, where volunteer searchers found sponges, gloves and a plastic bag containing a dead dog. Police again ruled out the shack had any connection to Tammy, but the volunteers weren't as convinced. They claimed whoever buried the dog went to a lot of trouble for such a simple task, and theorised that it hinted at possibly dangerous people living near the Kingery residence, which was in a secluded area of Edgefield. The police were unable to do a more in-depth investigation of the woods due to the hunting season making the woods unsafe. The second clue was the Kingery family's love of motorcycles, including Tammy's own fascination. Her daughter claimed to have seen someone similar in appearance to her mother riding on the back of a motorcycle. She witnessed this after she and her friends went searching for Tammy shortly after her father called. The Kingery's neighbour also claimed to have heard a loud engine roar to life and leave the vicinity of the residence's driveway between the time Park and his sons left and returned from their errands. However, neither claim resulted in any viable evidence. With all things considered, police still only have theories in relation to the case, but have hinted they suspect foul play. Park Kingery was investigated multiple times but was cleared, after cell phone pings and CCTV footage proved his alibi correct between the hours of 7 a.m. and Tammy's initial disappearance. Park himself assumes Tammy was abducted due to the state of the house and her belongings left behind. Others assume Tammy left to end her own life, as she had tried various times before, which would explain the note on the table. However, all wooded areas, hiking trails and bodies of water near Edgefield County were combed, and not a shred of DNA or evidence was found. With the note, the motorcycle claims, the locked doors and the wooden shack in the brush, nothing can be ruled out. It's truly one of the most bizarre and mysterious missing persons accounts we've ever seen, and we're all hoping investigators will someday uncover a lead that will clear up the fate of Tammy Kingery. Middie Rivers. On November the 12th, 1945, Middie Rivers, a 74-year-old local guide and hunter, vanished whilst escorting a party of 4 men back from a hunting expedition along the Long Trail. Middie, who had been walking slightly ahead of the group, was reportedly last seen at approximately 4 p.m, heading towards an area called Hal Hollow Brook. Assuming that Middie would be waiting for them by the time they reached their campsite, the men were slightly surprised to find no sign of him upon their return. Although initially they were unconcerned, knowing that Middie possessed a sound knowledge of the terrain. But as time passed, they began to feel anxious and raised the alarm. A search party of 20 local firemen began to comb the area for signs of Middie, but to no avail. The search expanded over the following days, with 200 US Army recruits drafted in to assist the worried local community in finding him. After 8 days of intense searching, there was still no indication of what could have happened to Middie. Search parties continued to look for him for a month, but he was never found, and the only indication that he had ever been in the area came in the form of an unused rifle cartridge, which was discovered lying at the bottom of Hal Hollow Brook. Paula Weldon. Paula Jean Weldon has the dubious honour of being the most high-profile missing person case to occur in the Bennington Triangle history. Paula, an 18-year-old student at Bennington College, went missing on December 1st, 1946. She had a part-time job working the lunch shift at the on-campus dining hall, and after her shift ended, she returned to a dormitory and announced to her friends of her intention to explore the nearby Long Trail. She asked if any of them wanted to accompany her, but unfortunately they were either all busy or had no desire to join her, so Paula decided to go on her own. She changed into her trainers and an eye-catching bright red coat with a fur collar, but she packed no extra clothes, nor did she take any money or food with her. So it appeared she only planned to be out for a couple of hours. Paula was observed by Danny Fager, a worker at a gas station located opposite the college entrance at 2:30 p.m. He claimed she sprinted up a small hill beside the college, only to walk back down again before heading down Route 67A towards Bennington. Paula then managed to hitch a lift with Louis Knapp, a local contractor who happened to be on his way home. He dropped her off along Route 9, approximately 2.5 miles away from Long Trail. Whether she hitched another lift or walked the rest of the way is not known, but Paula reached Bigfoot Hollow at 3:45 p.m, where she was given directions by Ernie Whitman, an employee for the local newspaper, the Bennington Banner. He reportedly warned her about not wearing enough warm clothing for being outside in winter, and so close to sunset, which would occur at 4:20 p.m. Paula reportedly encountered a group of young hikers on her way along the trail and asked them questions regarding the route. Then, after being observed at an area named Fay Valley Camp, she was never seen again. Paula's disappearance wasn't reported by her dorm mates that evening, as they had assumed she had returned to college and was studying in the library. However, when she failed to appear the next morning, her friends reported her missing to the head of college, and a large manhunt for Paula began. The college suspended classes, so all students were given the opportunity to help look for her, and they were joined by her father, Archibald, who was a well-renowned architect in his home state of Connecticut. He wielded his influence in order to get both the New York and Connecticut State Police to assist in searching for his daughter, which they were willing to do, especially given that Vermont had no state police force at this time. A $5,000 reward was posted for any information relating to Paula's disappearance, and the FBI were called in to help. 4 weeks after searching, both on foot and by air, Paula had still not been found. During the search, a waitress at a diner in Fall River, Massachusetts, had claimed to serve a rather agitated young lady that matched the description of Paula. After receiving this information, Archibald took it upon himself to investigate the lead, without telling the authorities involved, and he himself disappeared for a total of 36 hours. The police viewed his behaviour as somewhat suspicious, and local opinion began to favour the idea that Paula's father could himself be a suspect. This notion was reinforced by reports that Paula had at some point fallen out with Archibald, resulting in her decision to remain at Bennington College over Thanksgiving, rather than returning home. In turn, Paula's father proposed that she may have had a boyfriend that she planned on meeting, and insinuated that her unknown lover was at the heart of Paula's disappearance. Disappointed in the seeming lack of organisation and professionalism in the investigation. Indeed, there were no notes or records made for the first 10 days of the search. Paula's father left Bennington on December the 16th, never to find out what lay behind the mystery of his daughter's disappearance. Throughout the following decade, a local man reportedly proclaimed that he knew Paula was dead, and that he had knowledge of where her body was located. However, when escorted by police officers, he couldn't or didn't identify a site which contained any signs of human remains. And so, to this day, Paula's disappearance is a complete mystery. James Edward Tedford. Now this is a strange one. Exactly 3 years to the day after Paula went missing, on December the 1st, 1949, James Tedford, a World War II veteran, became the third person to vanish in the Bennington Triangle. James lived at a soldier's retirement home in Bennington and was returning there from visiting relatives in St. Albans. This was an arduous 8-hour bus journey for James, and as there had been snowfall, this meant the trip took even longer. There were around a dozen other passengers on the bus, and they all testified that James was on the vehicle for the whole duration of the journey, with some noting that they had seen him asleep in his seat at different stages throughout the trip. The passengers that remained on the bus until it reached Bennington claimed they recall seeing James in his seat at the last stop prior to reaching Bennington. However, when the bus reached its terminal point and the other passengers disembarked, James had somehow vanished. His personal effects remained on the luggage rack, and on the seat next to him was an open bus timetable. So with all his fellow travellers swearing that they had not seen him move from the bus, how had James managed to disappear in full view of them all in between two stop-off points? James Tedford was never seen or heard from again, becoming yet another mystery of the Bennington Triangle. Paul Jefferson. The fourth individual to vanish was 8-year-old Paul Jefferson on October the 12th, 1950. Paul's parents were farmers, and on the day he vanished, he was assisting his mother with her work on the farm. They had driven down to feed their livestock in a pickup truck, which Paul had remained in whilst his mother went about her business. When his mother returned to the vehicle, Paul was no longer sitting inside, nor could he be seen or heard playing anywhere nearby. Strangely enough, just like Paula, Paul was wearing a bright red coat, rendering him highly visible amidst the green landscape. But despite search parties involving police, volunteers and bloodhounds, Paul was never found. Legend has it that the dogs lost all trace of his scent at the same location that Paula Weldon was last seen along the long trail. To this day, locals consider it bad luck to wear red when walking the long trail. Freda Langer. The final disappearance to occur in the Bennington Triangle was on October the 28th, 1950, just 16 days after Paul Jefferson vanished. 53-year-old Freda Langer, an experienced hiker, was staying with her cousin Albert Alsner near Somerset Reservoir, which is located approximately 11 miles east of Glastonbury Mountain. During a hike with Herbert, Freda slipped and fell into a creek. She decided to return to the campsite to change into dry clothing, and asked Herbert to wait at their present location for her while she did so, and she would then rejoin him to resume their walk. When Freda failed to return, Herbert walked back to the campsite, only to find that she wasn't there, and that in fact nobody had seen her return to the campsite at all. Once again, a search party was formed, and they persevered in looking for Freda for 2 weeks, both by foot and by air. Sadly, Freda's body was eventually discovered, but not until the 12th of May 1951, not far from the campsite at Somerset Reservoir. Local authorities considered this strange, as the area adjacent to the reservoir was searched extensively at the time. Unfortunately, by the time Freda's body was recovered, the extent of the decomposition was so bad that no cause of death could be determined. The only comfort is that at least Freda's family were able to bury her, therefore giving them the small amount of closure that had been denied to the grieving families of the other 4 individuals that vanished in the area. Many theories still exist regarding the fate of the Bennington Five, including the possibility of a serial killer in the area. However, there has been other strange phenomena in the area over the years. Unexplained noises and lights have been reported in the triangle, together with UFO and Bigfoot sightings. According to local residents, the land around Bennington was considered cursed land by Native Americans, and they reportedly refused to enter this territory. So could any of these be the reasons behind the disappearances in the Bennington Triangle? Or is this just a sad case of unrelated random incidents? What do you think? The Butterfly People. On the 22nd of March 2011, at around 6:15 in the evening, a devastating tornado swept through Joplin, Missouri. It only lasted for around 38 minutes, but in that time, $2.8 billion worth of damage was done, and 158 people tragically lost their lives. While international news teams broadcast the story all over the world, separate reports began to surface from survivors who relayed bizarre and strange encounters with what they called butterfly people. The most prominent and well-documented of these tales come from 2 young cousins from the Joplin area who survived the tornado, Mason Lillard and Lage Grigsby. The pair were in their grandparents' truck at the time the tornado struck, and the winds managed to hurl the vehicle some 300 feet away from where it was parked. Lage was rescued from the debris of a nearby building, and Mason was still sat in the wrecked vehicle when she was found. The two of them were extremely lucky to be alive. When they came around and were given the opportunity to recall the day's events, reporters immediately noted one strange detail in both their stories: the presence of little humanoids with functioning butterfly wings they both witnessed at the time the disaster struck. Mason told the Globe that when the truck hit the ground again, she felt a hand touch her on the shoulder. As she turned, expecting to see Lage, she realised she'd been approached by two butterfly people, a blonde-haired one and a brunette. They helped her survive the terrifying ordeal, and it was clear to her that they meant no harm, as surprisingly, she said she felt relaxed upon seeing them. However, Lage and Mason weren't the only children to see the butterfly people. Other reports of humans with butterfly wings began to pour in from the survivors of the disaster, all saying they helped save them from the tornado. The butterfly people were observed shielding people from debris, tending to the wounded, and catching small children caught up in the 200 miles per hour wind. To this day, it's still unclear just what the butterfly people actually were, as they were only sighted in this one place on this one occasion. It's been suggested that in the heat of all the terror and carnage of the tornado, the imaginative minds of the children may have misinterpreted the paramedics and flashing ambulance lights that took them to hospital as something more mysterious, or perhaps hallucinations played a part in what they thought they saw. In reality, it seems unlikely that we're sharing parts of the world with a brand new species of airborne humanoid creature, but until it can be proved otherwise, there is always a possibility, and in the minds of the children caught up in the Joplin tornado, they were very much real. Gazeka. In the forested plains and mountains of Papua New Guinea, a truly bizarre creature has been spotted on multiple occasions. The Gazeka, whose description is said to match something between an oversized tapir and a giant prehistoric ground sloth, has been witnessed several times, but the first account was in 1870 by British traveller C. Monckton. What he described was a giant mammalian herbivore, roughly 6 foot at the shoulder, when walking on all fours, that could also rear up and walk on 2 legs. It had a tapir-like trunk for a nose, walked on its knuckles, and had long, sharp claws like a sloth. The creature was named by Papua New Guinea's natives as the pig devil. It was first suggested that the animal might be a new species of rhinoceros, but this has since been ruled out, as there's no evidence that rhinoceros ever lived in Papua New Guinea. Following the encounter, Monckton sent a team out to track the animal deep into the mountains near the North River, and sure enough, there it stood. It's said to have turned to look at the travellers as it promptly reared up and took off into the heavy snow, and that was the last time the Gazeka was seen. However, newspapers at the time told a slightly different tale, claiming the Gazeka was initially witnessed brutally attacking a small settlement of natives, and Monckton fired a shot at the beast before it reared up, standing at around 25 feet before fleeing into the night. Whatever the truth, there are signs that Gazeka did exist. This is reinforced by ancient stone artifacts that have been found in Papua New Guinea, featuring creatures that resemble the Gazeka. Another train of thought is that it's a misplaced Palagestes, a large marsupial mammal resembling a giant tapir that once lived in ancient Australia, and fits the Gazeka's bizarre description almost perfectly. Could it be that the Gazeka is an ancient ancestor of the giant prehistoric Palagestes and is still living in the mountains of Papua New Guinea? What do you think? Mahamba. According to the Bobangi Aboriginals of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, something truly monstrous currently resides in the swamps and jungles that cover vast areas of the country. The Mahamba is a creature reported to be responsible for the violent deaths of multiple natives and travellers over the years, and those who have been lucky enough to survive an encounter with one seem extremely sure it's a new species, completely unidentified to science. The Mahamba is described as an enormous reptilian creature, not too dissimilar to a crocodile, with elongated legs that give it the ability to ruthlessly chase down large prey. Its appearance has also been likened to that of a mosasaurus. the gigantic aquatic apex predators of the Cretaceous, depicted in Jurassic World. The creature is said to be roughly 5 feet in length and spends the majority of its time crouching just below the murky surface of the Congo River, where it's been known to smash through canoes and rafts, devouring anyone on board. The Babangi natives are no strangers to crocodiles. Nile crocodiles are both a dangerous and common sight in the Congo River basin. But multiple accounts have specifically stated that the Mahamba is something clearly different, and much more deadly. Sightings of the Mahamba first started to rise around the 19th century, along with further exploration of Africa, where European explorers not only heard tales from the natives, but supposedly encountered the creature firsthand. It's hard to tell whether or not the reports of the Mahamba are accurate or not. There is always the chance that it could be a genuine, undiscovered species of large crocodile. But as always with the more dangerous cryptids, a surprise attack from a large Nile crocodile can be easily exaggerated in the heat of the moment, and stories do spread fast. What do you think the Mahamba could be? Stella's sea ape. Now, if this one is real, it's quite possibly one of the most bizarre creatures to have ever lived on our planet. On the 10th of August 1741, famed explorer George Wilhelm Steller was sailing in the icy waters off the coast of Alaska when something caught his eye. An aquatic mammal, roughly 5 feet long, with a long, tapered body, ending in dolphin-like flukes, 2 short flippers-like arms with webbed digits, and the human-like face of an ape. It had large piercing eyes and whiskers that appeared to resemble facial hair. Steller allegedly observed the creature from just a few meters away for around 2 hours, and attempted to fire several shots at it, missing the target as the creature swam away. It wasn't sighted again after this, and the information on this encounter is limited, but to date, Steller's sea ape remains one of the most intriguing cryptids out there. If Steller is to be believed, the creature's discovery could reshuffle so much of what we know about primates and their evolution. A completely new species of aquatic ape living in secret right under our noses would raise many questions. Where did it come from? How does it survive? And perhaps most importantly, how intelligent is it? Could sightings of the supposed ape even account for historical glimpses of what sailors and explorers claim to be mermaids? After all, Steller was a reputable naturalist and has put his name to many real discoveries in the past, such as Steller's sea lion, sea eagle, and now extinct sea cow, all who definitely exist. So who are we to question what he saw? However, on the other hand, he could just have been mistaken on this occasion, as the general form and shape of the Steller's sea ape isn't too dissimilar to a dolphin or a seal, both of which could have popped up at any point during Steller's travels across the ocean. But when you think only around 5% of the world's oceans have been fully explored, is it inconceivable that a colony of aquatic apes live happily in the depths of the sea? What do you think? Umibozu. Sticking with the nautical theme, the Umibozu is a bizarre Japanese sea monster that has terrorized coastal fishing villages for centuries, and is also featured in the ebook we mentioned at the start of this video. Japanese fishermen have long told tales of a terrifying humanoid presence that lurks just beneath the waves of the Pacific Ocean. The Umibozu, or sea monk, is a huge jet-black void of a creature, human in shape with 2 colossal white eyes brightly visible against the rest of its body. They are often depicted with a wide grin plastered across their faces, and can range in size from just a few feet to a few hundred feet. They are said to be visible only on dark, stormy nights when the sea is battered with storms, and have been known to capsize whole vessels as they slowly rise up from the waves, crashing their bodies down on ships that sail too close. They get their name from how they initially appeared to the first sailors that encountered them, who claimed they looked like gigantic, monstrous versions of Buddhist monks, some suggesting they are in fact the spirits of those who drowned at sea. It's also said that Umibozu capsize ships for fun and have no intention of actually feeding on humans. In some reports, Umibozu have even allegedly been heard speaking to one another. In the past, these giants have imposed a huge threat to small coastal villages that depend on fishing for trade and food, superstitious fishermen who refuse to work if an umibozu has been sighted, and this could lead to disaster for the hungry village. The umibozu allegedly came onto the nearby beaches once a year to breed, where their tiny offspring have been sighted running along the sand before heading back into the water to begin life. As time has passed, there have been plenty of recorded umibozu sightings. They range from harmless encounters where huge individuals have been seen wading through the shallow coastal waters for days at a time, to an incident in 1971 when an enormous aquatic creature became caught in a Japanese trawler's net. The fishermen raised the net to reveal a giant creature, black in colour with one visible white eye staring at them. As the net's mechanism snapped under the weight of the creature, a colossal silhouette was allegedly sighted diving under the water before swimming away. What is remarkable about the sighting of the umibozu is they do all appear to follow a common theme, and there are few known creatures that may have been mistaken for an umibozu, the main one being a killer whale. It can certainly match for its size, and its striking black and white skin kind of matches the description. Other smaller creatures that may be in the running are the now extinct Japanese sea lion, a mammal that was common around the coasts and shallow waters, where the smaller umibozu was sighted, or perhaps even the Japanese angel shark. However, those who have encountered the umibozu would probably disagree, believing the creature is an as yet undiscovered sea monster. The Bradley sisters. On July 6, 2001, Tracy Bradley had to go to work at 6:30 am. Being a single parent, that meant leaving her two girls, 10-year-old Tionda and 3-year-old Diamond, alone. The girls' sisters, Victoria and Rita, were staying with their grandmother, and it was Victoria's birthday the next day, so the whole family were excited about the upcoming party. At 12:30 p.m, Tracy arrived back at the apartment in Bronzeville, Chicago, with Diamond's father, George, but the girls were not there, although Tionda had left her mother a note explaining that she had taken Diamond for a walk to a nearby store and a school. Oddly, Tracy and George planned to pick the girls up and take them on a camping trip. This seems strange when you consider that the next day was Victoria's birthday, and that they had never been camping before. Tracy and her family searched the local area for over 5 hours before they contacted the police, because Tracy was afraid that she would get into trouble for leaving the girls home alone. She asked George to help with the search, but he instead decided to leave. Tracy told police that she thought that the note had not been written by Tionda. She said that the grammar used in the note was too advanced for her, and she had never left a note for her mother before. Once informed, the police immediately began a search, and they also visited over 100 known sex offenders who lived nearby. More than 100 detectives were assigned to the investigation. Police expanded the search area, and more policemen joined the hunt. It became one of the biggest manhunts in Chicago's history. Because of the delay in the girls being reported missing, the police were soon searching in the dark, and the girls seemed to have vanished into thin air. Due to the inconsistencies of her statements, Tracy was questioned many times over the next 5 weeks. Over the years, police have interviewed more than 11,000 people, gathering huge amounts of information, but each lead has hit a dead end. The girl's great-aunt, Sheila, has been a proponent in the search and has never given up hope, regularly releasing age progression photos to show how Tionda and Diamond may look now, as they would be in their 20s. It's now 18 years since the girls went missing, and no suspects have ever been named by authorities, and it's still a mystery as to what happened to Tionda and Diamond Bradley. The Beaumont Children. It's been called the day that Australia lost its innocence, the 26th of January 1966. The day that Jane, aged 9, Anna, aged 7, and Grant Beaumont, aged just 4, went missing. The children lived with their parents, Nancy and Jim, in the Somerton Park suburbs of Adelaide. As it was the height of the summer, the 3 siblings took a short bus ride to the nearby Glenelg Beach in South Australia. The journey only took 5 minutes, and the children had been to the beach without their parents many times before. Jane was mature for her age, and it was socially acceptable at the time for children to have more freedom than they are offered today. It was only a short walk to Glenelg, but it was over 100 degrees and far too hot for the children to go either by bike or by foot. So they left on the 8:45 AM bus and were expected back on the midday bus. When they didn't arrive back at noon, their mother Nancy thought that they had missed the bus and would arrive on the next one, which was due at 2 PM. But that bus also came and went with no sign of the children. Jim arrived home early just before 3 PM and immediately drove to the beach to search. At 5:30 PM, they went to Glenelg Police Station and reported all 3 of the children missing. Because it was Australia Day, the beach was packed with holidaymakers, and several witnesses saw the children in the company of a man. The children seemed very friendly with the man, so it was thought that they had probably met the man on a previous visits to the beach, and that was why they were so trusting of him. The man never came forward to eliminate himself from the police investigation, and the children have never been seen since. There have been many theories put forward as to what could have happened to the children. Over the years, some of the most infamous and evil criminals from across Australia have been suspected of involvement in the case, including the notorious paedophile murderer Derek Percy. When questioned, he had admitted that he had been to the beach with his family on the day that the children went missing, but he denied any involvement in their disappearance. Many new leads and theories have emerged over the years, from cold kidnappings to murder, and Jim and Nancy Beaumont have always helped to investigate each claim thoroughly, in the hope that their children would return. The investigation is regarded as one of the largest in Australian history. As recently as February 2018, excavations were made at a factory site near Adelaide, in the hope of finding some trace of the 3 children. Unfortunately, nothing was found that could provide any further clues. 53 years have passed. Mr. and Mrs. Beaumont are now in their 90s, and resigned to the fact that they will probably never find out what happened to their children. To this day, the case is still ongoing, and there is still a $1 million reward for any information regarding the 3 Beaumont children's disappearance. The Skelton Brothers. Andrew was 9, Alexander was 7, and Tanner was 5 on Thanksgiving in 2010. They lived in Morenci, a small town near southwest Detroit, Michigan. Their mother Tanya and father John did not live together because they were divorced at the time. The brothers did, however, have regular planned visits with their father. Tanya planned to pick up the boys at 3 PM, but decided to ring up in the morning to see if the boys wanted to come home early. But John told her that they weren't at home because they had gone to Jackson to visit his friend Joanne Taylor. Tanya said that was fine, and she would pick up the boys at the usual time of 3 PM. However, after walking past John's house, she noticed that his van was still on the driveway. She rang him and asked why the van was still there if they were in Jackson, but John said his friend Joanne had picked them up, and that she would bring them back to Tanya's at 3 PM. He then changed his mind and admitted that he had tried to hang himself and was in the hospital. When the boys did not return at 3 PM, Tanya immediately rang the police. An Amber Alert was issued for all 3 boys, and the search began. John Skelton was arrested at the hospital and his house was searched. The rooms were in disarray, furniture had been smashed and mattresses had been slashed, but there was no sign of the boys. Skelton said that he had met Joanne Taylor on the internet, but it turned out that she didn't exist. He then said that he handed the boys over to a group called the United Foster Outreach and Underground Sanctuary to save them from their mother. The underground group turned out to not exist either. Skelton went to trial, charged with 3 counts of parental kidnapping and unlawful imprisonment. He was found guilty and sentenced to between 10 and 15 years in jail. John Skelton's story changes with every retelling, although he has consistently maintained that he had not harmed the boys, and they were alive and well and living with a family that he knows. Police believe that Skelton murdered the children because of the custody battle with Tanya, but are unable to charge him without any proof. The National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children have released age progression photos of the 3 boys, who have now been missing for over 8 years. Michigan police are also offering a $60,000 reward for any information on the whereabouts of Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner Skelton. The Lyon Sisters. On the 25th of March 1975, 12-year-old Sheila and 10-year-old Catherine Lyon walked to Wheaton Plaza Mall in their hometown of Wheaton in Washington, D.C. It was Easter time, and they were excited to see the Easter Bunny decorations, as well as having some lunch while they were there. They set off sometime between 11 AM and noon, and at 2 PM they were seen by their older brother Jay eating pizza at the Orange Bowl in the mall. Between 2:30 PM and 3 PM, they were seen by a friend walking the half-a-mile journey back to their home, but they never arrived. At 7 PM, their parents called the police to report them missing. The police were certain that the girls hadn't run away. Many witnesses came forward and were interviewed, and the local area and nearby woods were searched extensively, but there was no sign of Sheila or Catherine. One of the young witnesses, who knew the Lyon sisters, described a creepy man who was in his late teens or early 20s, who had stared at the girls for so long that she went over to ask if he wanted a picture. Police made a sketch that showed the man with long hair, acne, and scars on his left cheek. Another witness came forward and described a much older man who had been using a tape recorder whilst talking to Sheila and Catherine. He was said to be in his 50s, smartly dressed with grey hair. A sketch of this man was made public by the police, and calls came flooding in as this man was seen at other malls around the area. A local man named Lloyd Welch also came forward and told a security guard at the mall that he had been there on the day that the Lyon sisters disappeared, and he had seen tape recorder man get into a car with the girls. Welch was given a lie detector test, which he failed, but police just thought that he was trying to get the $9,000 reward that was being offered for any help in solving the case. Almost 40 years later, in 2014, after taking a fresh look at the case and going back over paperwork, police came across the file containing the statement from an 18-year-old Welch. On a hunch, detectives went to re-interview him, who was serving a 33-year sentence for sex crimes against a 10-year-old girl at the time. Welch then admitted that he had kidnapped the Lyon sisters almost 40 years earlier. Later, a man named Henry Parker came forward and said that his cousin, Lloyd Welch, had arrived at his home on Taylor Mountain Road, Virginia, in the spring of 1975. He had brought 2 large army-style duffel bags with him that were badly stained and smelled very bad. Parker said he helped Welch place the bags on a fire in the backyard, and they burned the bags for several days. At trial, Welch avoided the death penalty by pleading guilty to both murders. He was sentenced to 48 years in prison, and the remains of Sheila and Catherine Lyon have never been found. The O'Brien brothers. At the time of their disappearance in November 1996, Adam was 14, Trevor was 11, and Mitchell was 4. The brothers were visiting their father, Gary O'Brien, who lived in Torbay, Newfoundland, and Labrador, Canada. Their parents were divorced, and their mother Diana had custody of the brothers. At 8:30 PM, Diana received a call from Gary. He stated that he would not be returning the boys, and that he had booby-trapped his house so that it would explode if anyone tried to get in. Diana asked to speak to the boys, but Gary refused to let her and hung up. The police were immediately informed. Gary had indeed rigged up his house with a crude bomb made from 2 400-pound propane tanks. If detonated, the bomb would have destroyed not only Gary's house, but also several houses in the area. Gary O'Brien has a history of mental health problems, as well as suicidal and violent tendencies, although he is described as a resourceful man. A year after they went missing, Gary's car engine was found in the ocean near Flat Rock, which is approximately 6 miles from his house. There were no bodies or any other clues at the site. Diana believes that Gary dumped the engine off the cliffs in order to throw police off the scent. Gary is wanted by Interpol, who list him as an internationally sought suspect charged with abduction. They have also warned that he could set traps that will cause bodily harm. Diana believes that her children are still alive and are being kept somewhere without access to technology. Several age progression photographs of the boys have been released over the last 20 years, and the case remains open. The Skeleton Lake. A shallow lake in the Himalayas, known as Rupkund, may not look like the ideal place to conceal secrets, but this high-altitude glacier lake, located in the Uttarakhand state of India, is the last resting place for hundreds of people thought to have been killed in a sudden violent hailstorm in the 9th century. The skeletons only became visible at the bottom of the lake for just 1 month out of the year, when the air is warm enough to melt the ice covering them, and they were first spotted in 1942 by a game ranger, although rumours of their existence had been widespread for years. Investigations were carried out, and it was estimated that around 300 human remains lay at the bottom of the lake, along with their tools, shoes, jewellery, and other artefacts. Years later, a team from National Geographic magazine retrieved 30 of the skeletons, and were horrified to discover that flesh was still attached to some of the bones. It was also determined that the majority of the remains were of Iranian heritage, with just a few of them from the local population. It can only be speculated how so many people met such a sudden and violent death. However, the local legend says that the king of Kannauj, Raja Jastahaval, and his pregnant wife Rani, along with their vast entourage, went on a pilgrimage to Nanda Devi Shrine, and ran into a fierce storm near Rupkund Lake, and giant hailstones rained down on them, killing the whole party. All we can think is that it must have been some large hailstones to kill that many people that quickly, and it's likely something far more sinister was responsible. What do you think? Mysterious underwater cave system in Mexico. For centuries, Soquayum, a flooded sinkhole located in Mexico, Yucatan Peninsula, terrified the locals so much that they would not go near it, as they believed it was guarded by a feathered, horse-headed serpent who would snatch anyone who got too close. So when underwater archaeologists sought permission to explore the flooded cavern, a local shaman performed a traditional ceremony to ask permission for the researchers to enter and appease the serpent. After entering the water-filled cavern, the archaeologists discovered that there may be a very good reason why the villagers feared the place. At first glance, it appeared something terrible had taken place there, as the cavern floor was scattered with skulls and human bones. However, there was far more to this water-filled cavern than initially thought, and further exploration has led to the discovery of an additional 4 kilometers of underwater passages, as well as an array of archaeological discoveries, and is now recognized as the largest and most important underwater archaeological site in the world. Some of the skulls discovered are elongated, which is consistent with an era when heads were thought to be intentionally flattened, typically during infancy when the skull is most pliable. Most of the remains and artifacts are relics of Mayan culture, when it was customary for residents to be buried under or near their houses, suggesting the bones belonged to people who had been intentionally secluded from the community, possibly due to the plague or some other ailment. More recent exploration has revealed some of the bones date back even further, with one of the female skeletons believed to be around 12,600 years old, dating back to the last ice age. Also, remains of giant sloths and an extinct elephant-like mammal have been discovered, along with ceramics, altars, shrines, and wall etchings, some of which were likely used in funeral and human sacrifice ceremonies. Take a look at this extraordinary footage. It seems that this mysterious and ever-growing cave system holds a lot of secrets, and gives a grim insight into the lives of our ancient relatives, to anyone who is brave enough to explore its murky depths. The Ship Graveyard. At first glance, Chuuk Lagoon, located in the central Pacific, looks like paradise, but beneath its crystal blue waters lies an altogether different story. The lagoon sits inside a cluster of small islands known as Chuuk State that make up one of 4 of the federated states of Micronesia, and during World War II, the area provided Japan with a perfect base to protect its large ships and military hardware. But in 1944, American forces launched an attack and caught the Japanese with their guard down, and although they responded quickly, it was too late, and over a 2-day bombardment, more than 60 warships and crew ended up on the floor of the lagoon. 2 subsequent attacks in the same year left Chuuk Lagoon a toxic graveyard of sunken ships, leaking vast quantities of oil and gasoline into the water. The Japanese personnel who survived the attack, along with the local population, were left to fend for themselves, and it's estimated tens of thousands of them starved to death in the months that followed. After the war ended, the world forgot about Chuuk Lagoon and the slaughter that occurred there, until 1969. Jacques Cousteau's diving team visited the lagoon to find and document the wrecks. Unfortunately, they found more than shipwrecks. The seafloor was littered with the skeletons of those that perished. The team also took lots of artifacts from the wrecks. However, the expedition did highlight what happened at Chuuk, and a lot of the human remains were removed and given proper burials. Today, Chuuk Lagoon is known for the best wreck diving in the world, and those lucky enough to go down there will see an array of equipment, including various vehicles, weapons, clothing, and other personal paraphernalia. They are also likely to come across human bones, and these serve as an eerie reminder of the real sacrifice of war. Underwater train cemetery. Now, it's not unusual to find a ship graveyard at the bottom of the sea, as you will know from the previous topic, but it's almost unheard of to find a train graveyard. While this is exactly what Paul Hepler found back in 1985, when he was mapping the bottom of the ocean off the coast of New Jersey. Closer inspection revealed trains had lain preserved in the water since the 1850s, and they were identified as rare 15-ton Planet Class 222T models, which were only made for a short period in the early 1850s because they were too small to compete with the larger, more powerful models being produced at the time. The question is, how on earth did they end up 90 feet underwater, and why is there no historical record of them ever being built or being lost? Investigators believe the engines could have either fallen in the sea or been deliberately pushed, as they were being transported from Boston to the mid-Atlantic, possibly after they got caught up in a storm. But the truth is, no one really knows, and to date, the mystery of how two trains ended at the bottom of the sea is unknown, and they remain in their watery grave until someone decides to bring them to the surface. Pamphilos. The Antikythera wreck is a Roman-era shipwreck dating from the second quarter of the 1st century BC. It was first discovered in 1901 by sponge divers off Point Glyphidia in Greece, and has so far yielded a number of precious artifacts from that era. But without doubt, the most prized and mysterious of these is the Antikythera mechanism, a sophisticated clockwork instrument that modelled the passage of time and the movements of celestial bodies, and has been described as the world's oldest computer, and is the most sophisticated piece of machinery ever recovered from the ancient world, and to date, scientists still have no idea who made it or why. But this wreck is the gift that keeps giving, and in 2016, divers found buried in sediment the first human remains ever recovered from an ancient shipwreck. Marine archaeologist Brendan P. Foley made the discovery, and he believes the bones could hold the important information about the Antikythera mechanism and other mysteries about the ship and our ancient ancestors. The skeleton is well preserved, considering it's over 2,000 years old. An analysis of the remains, which include most of the skull, 2 femurs, and the long bones of the forearm, suggest that they belong to a man aged between 25 and 30 years old. He has been named Pamphilos after the inscription on a cup found in the same wreckage. Take a look at this video of the recovery. If only bones could talk, as one thing is for sure, Pamphilos holds the key to one of the world's greatest mysteries, and could answer so many unanswered questions about our ancient ancestors. The green-skinned children of Woolpit. Woolpit is a beautiful village nestled in the English countryside of Suffolk. Like many other settlements in Britain, Woolpit's history can be traced back for 2,000 years. and the origins of its name have been debated over the years. It was thought that there were links to the wool trade, yet the village was named in a document of 1005, long before the wool trade began. It was also thought that there were once wolf pits dug outside the village in order to protect its citizens. However, the most likely story is that it was named after the Earl of the Eastern Angels, Alf Kettle, whose name means wolf. Sometime during the 12th century, villagers were working in the fields outside of the village in order to bring in the harvest. On taking a break, they were surprised to see two strange children walking towards them from the tree line. The young boy and girl looked frightened, and their skin had a peculiar green tinge. Their clothes were made from strange materials, and they spoke in a new kind of language that the villagers had never heard before. The children were taken to Wilkes Hall, which was the nearby manor of Sir Richmond de Coll. After being given bread and other food to eat, the children became quite upset and refused to eat for several days, even though they were obviously hungry. Then, after seeing a servant carrying a tray of raw beans, the children took the beans and gobbled them down instantly. At the time, the story was verified by two independent sources. A man named Ralph of Coggins Hall, who wrote about the children in his books, The Chronicle of England, and another monk named William of Newbury, who also wrote about the incident which had reached him at his monastery in North Yorkshire. And although he lived far away from Woolpit, he was so convinced in the reliability of his sources that he wrote about the children in 1189 in his book The History of English Affairs. The two children stayed at Wilkes Hall for several weeks and continued to survive by eating the raw beans until they were finally persuaded to eat other things. Eventually, the green tinge on their skin faded and they began to look like normal human children. Sadly, the boy became sick and died, but the older and stronger girl thrived and was able to learn English. Coggins Hall wrote that the girl went on to describe the land that she and her brother had come from as a place of permanent twilight. She said everyone and everything in the land was green. She called it St. Martin's Land, and said that there was a huge river and a bright land could be seen on the other side. She said that she had been herding cattle with her brother when they heard bells and followed the cattle into a dark cave, only to emerge into bright sunlight, frightened and bewildered when the villagers of Woolpit found them. Able to integrate into her new surroundings, the girl became a servant at the manor house and later married a local man. So could the children have crossed over from another dimension through some sort of mysterious doorway? What do you think? The Beatles never split up. In 2009, a man calling himself James Richards set up a website page. On it he describes how he was transported into another parallel dimension, and there he was able to steal a cassette tape of a never-before-heard Beatles album, because in this other dimension, the Beatles had never split up. On his webpage, James recounts the story of his interdimensional theft. On the 9th of September 2009, he was travelling home to Livermore, California, from his friend's house in Turlock, when he realised that his dog was needing to take a toilet break. He was driving through a place called Del Porto Canyon, and the time was approximately 2 p.m. The dog ran off, chasing a rabbit, and James ran after it. The ground was uneven and full of rabbit holes. James soon tripped over and knocked himself unconscious. When he awoke, in a furnished room, his head was bandaged and he could hear traffic noises outside. This made him feel uneasy because he knew that the place where he had fallen was a rural area and away from civilization. There was also a strange electronic machine in the room that James didn't recognise. The door opened and his dog ran in, followed by a man. He introduced himself as Jonas and asked if James was okay. He said he had found him unconscious in a field with his dog. James replied that he was fine and asked where he was now. Jonas replied that his house was about 20 feet from where he had found James in the field. James said that this was impossible because there was no houses for another 20 miles around the place that he had fallen. Jonah then told James that what he was about to tell him would be incredible and that he probably wouldn't believe him. Jonah said the machine was a transporter that had brought James into a parallel universe. He said he often travelled to our Earth dimension, and after finding James injured and laying in the hot sun, he decided that the best thing would be to bring him back, although he wouldn't normally take people through the portal. They talked of many things, including music, where they discovered that many Earth bands also existed in the other dimension. They began to discuss the Beatles, and Jonas showed James some cassette tapes that he had because CDs didn't exist in his world. The names of several of the albums were the same, but some were new to James, and Jonas said that his brother had just been to one of their concerts, meaning in this world the Beatles were still together. James asked if he could make a copy of one, but Jonas got freaked out and said that James was not allowed to take anything back to his own world, because it was not safe. Later, when Jonas was distracted, James was able to slip one of the tapes into his pocket, and he later returned to our world, back through the portal. James ends this tale by making a plea for any other dimensional travellers to get in touch with him. The album is called Everyday Chemistry, and all 11 tracks of the album are available online. It's a mix of different elements from several of the Beatles' solo albums, with some new parts added in. So did James really stumble across a doorway to another dimension, or is he merely telling a tall tale? Carol McElhenney. Carol was travelling through San Bernardino in California on her way to attend a sheepdog trial. She saw a sign for Riverside and knew the place well, as her family's ancestry was rooted there. She decided that she would visit Riverside the next day to see her childhood home and visit her grandparents' graves in the cemetery. After staying in the area overnight, she returned to Riverside, but she found that everything had changed. The street where she had lived after leaving college was there. The house numbers were the same, but the bungalows looked different, and her house had disappeared completely. On the street where her grandmother used to live, the houses were all new, and there were no trees like Carol remembered. Her grandmother's house and the house next door, where her aunt and uncle had lived, were both gone. The street was full of modern-style houses, unlike the large Tudor-style house that she remembered her grandmother living in. Most troubling was the fact that Carol could not find the cemetery. She drove around the block a couple of times, but it was just a fenced-off piece of land, overgrown with weeds. Confused and upset, Carol began to drive around to see if she could find anywhere that was familiar. Both Riverside City College and Central Middle School looked the same, but University Avenue, which was the main street, now looked like a ghetto. There were no more shops, banks, and hotels like she remembered. Carol also noticed that the people looked scary, and she was afraid to stop. She felt as though getting out of the car would cause her to be trapped in this creepy other world forever. After a couple of unnerving hours, she decided to drive back. Once she arrived, she found that everything was back to normal. Several years later, Carol's father died, and as he had asked to be buried in the same cemetery as his parents, she had to return to Riverside. Once there, Carol found that everything had returned to normal. The cemetery was no longer a vacant plot. The streets and houses and University Avenue had all returned to normality. Was Carol, like she believes, transported to another dimension? She believes that if she had got out of the car, then she would have gone missing, unable to ever return to her own world. She thinks it was the same Riverside, but she had reached it by somehow going down a different dimensional path. The Professor from Venezuela and the Pear-Child of Tenerife. It was a bright sunny day in the South American city of Merida, Venezuela, during the early 1970s. A university professor was returning to his car on the campus of the University of the Andes. The professor was seen by several eyewitnesses as he walked across the parking lot. He stopped a couple of times to talk to students about lectures and papers as he walked towards his car. He got into his car, and on seeing two of his students waving to him, he waved back before closing the door. The closing of the car door seemed to trigger something because the professor just vanished. It was as if he had stepped through a portal as the door closed. The unnamed professor has now been missing for over 40 years. His story was reported by a journalist in the well-respected Venezuelan newspaper El Tiempo. Could the professor have slipped into a parallel world, like the little girl in the next story? In 1905 in Tenerife, in the Canary Islands, a little girl was leading a flock of sheep back to her barn when she became tired and decided to take a nap under a tree. She was awoken by a tall, white being that led her by the hand to a cave which was full of other similar beings. In the meantime, her family had begun frantically searching for her, as she had been missing for several hours. They searched for the girl for many years after, but she had mysteriously vanished. The girl, after spending what she felt was a couple of hours in the cave, returned to her family. Her family was astonished to see her return several years after her disappearance, but looking exactly the same age as when she had left. Out of fear, her family hid her away, scared that she would be seen as cursed, and researchers have been unable to discover her identity. She became known as the Pear Child of Tenerife. Could this be proof that anyone travelling to another dimension will have to pay the high price of time bending? Where on their return, everything and everybody that they knew and loved could have aged or even already be gone. Lorena Garcia Gordo. For anyone who has ever seen the Gwyneth Paltrow movie Sliding Doors, they will know just how Lorena Garcia Gordo feels. Alternating between two different but parallel worlds, she believes that her life had gone down one path, only to awake one morning to find that it had actually gone down a completely different one. In 2008, Lorena posted a plea for help online. She said that she was 41 years old and was afraid that people would think she was psychotic, because she had felt like she had jumped into a parallel universe. She then asked anyone who had a similar experience to get in touch. Lorena said that she had awoke to find that lots of things were very different, but it was the small details that stood out at first. Her bed sheets were not the ones on her bed when she fell asleep, and there were clothes in her wardrobe that she couldn't remember buying. On leaving for work, she found that the car was parked in the wrong space. She hadn't parked the car there since her split from her ex-boyfriend 6 months earlier. She had worked at the same office for 20 years. She drove to work along what she felt was the same route, but when she arrived, the name on her office door was not hers. Thinking that she was on the wrong floor, she checked to find that she worked in a completely different office, under a different manager, but she couldn't remember ever changing departments. Panicking, she checked all over her ID, which proved to be the right name, picture, and address, so she went to visit the doctor to check that she hadn't been drugged or was suffering from amnesia. All the tests were apparently negative. Stranger was the fact that she had split up from her old boyfriend of 7 years 6 months previously and had been dating a new man for 4 months. She knew him and his son quite well, so she called his number, but someone else answered the phone, only to tell her that no one there answered to the name she gave. She was so convinced that he did exist, she even hired a detective to try to find him, but there was no trace of him or his son in that city. It turned out that Lorena was actually still with her boyfriend of 7 years, and in this world they had never split up. She has supposedly sought psychiatric help and been told that what she is experiencing is all stress related. So did Lorena wake up in a different dimension? If so, is this stress related or is she lying? Which Lorena is the real one? The one in the dimension or the one in the dimension that she claims to have travelled from? Daxa Island. Imagine this. You have a couple of $1 million and you want to buy a beautiful place where you can relax whenever you want, and discover you have enough to buy an island that has lush green trees, plants, and a captivating view of the ocean. However, would you still be interested in it if you found out that the island was a site where several innocent people were executed, suspected of being Nazi sympathisers? Well, that appears to be the dilemma that potential buyers face when confronted with Daxa Island, a small island located near Croatia. It's a beautiful place with lush woodlands, secluded beaches, and its own lighthouse. Centuries ago, there is evidence the island was inhabited and enjoyed a peaceful existence, and in 1281, a Franciscan monastery was built on the island, dedicated to the martyred Saint Sabina, a widowed Christian who in 125 AD was martyred for her beliefs in Vendena, Italy. However, this now uninhabited island's peaceful history came to an abrupt halt as World War II drew to a close and Nazi Germany began to fall. Yugoslav partisans entered Dubrovnik and chose 53 men suspected of being Nazi sympathisers. These men were not given a trial and no evidence was found connecting them to Nazi beliefs. The men were rowed out to Daxa and executed. Their unburied bodies were then left to rot on the beaches. It wasn't until September 2009 that authorities announced they had discovered the remains of 6 of the victims, and soon after another 48 were recovered and proper burials were afforded to all of them. Since the massacre, the island is said to have a haunted feeling, and the owners of the island do not even live there. Few tourists ever visit, and those who want to visit will struggle to find anyone to take them to the island, as local boat companies reportedly do not go near it. To date, the island is still for sale, and even at a reduced price, no one seems to be interested in buying it. Snake Island. 40 miles off the coast of Sao Paulo in Brazil is a tiny but naturally beautiful island nicknamed Snake Island. It has a rich and varied plant life and magnificent rainforests. It's also the only natural home of the critically endangered venomous Bothrops insularis snake, better known as the golden lancehead pit viper. These deadly snakes became trapped on the island when rising sea levels cut them off from the mainland, and when left alone on the island, these snakes rapidly increased in numbers, reaching a population high of over 400,000. There are other non-venomous snakes living on the island as well, and at one time it was estimated there was 1 snake to every square metre of land. For this reason, humans are prohibited from setting foot on the island for their own safety, and that of the snakes. But considering the venom of the golden lancehead is thought to be 5 times more potent than other species of lancehead, it's not hard to see who would fare better. A single bite from a golden lancehead is so threatening that kidney failure, brain bleeds, and neurotic muscle tissue can occur within an hour, and without treatment, death is inevitable. Even lanceheads with less venom than the pit viper are responsible for more human deaths than any other snakes in both North and South America. However, thankfully, since pit vipers only live on this one uninhabited island, there have never been any recorded human bites. But that hasn't stopped the legends, like the story of a fisherman who became stranded on the island after his boat broke down. Not realizing where he was, he set off into the forest, and unfortunately his body was later found in a grim state, ravaged by snake bites. Then there was the poor lighthouse keeper who lived on the island with his family, and while they slept one night, the snakes found their way into their home, and the family met a horrific death. Whether there is any truth in these stories is unclear. However, on a more serious note, in recent years, the golden lancehead numbers have drastically decreased, and a survey in 2015 estimated only 2,000 to 4,000 were left. Now this sounds like a lot, but when you think these snakes only live on this island, so they are the only natural ones left in the world, their decline is thought to be due to limited resources, habitat destruction by humans, poaching and inbreeding. Also, their fussy eating habits haven't helped, as they feed on only 2 species of bird, the southern house wren and a species of flycatcher. So unless they can change their taste and switch to some of the over 40 other species of birds that live on the island, their numbers are likely to continue to decline. North Brother Island. North Brother Island is one of 2 small islands located in New York's East State River between the Bronx and Rikers Island. In 1850, the infamous Riverside Hospital was built on the island to house patients suffering from smallpox and other quarantinable illnesses. The sick were shipped to the island until they either recovered or died. One of its most notable residents was Mary Mallon, also known as Typhoid Mary, who arrived on the island for the second time in 1915, where she stayed until her death in 1938. Mary was the first known asymptomatic carrier of the pathogen associated with typhoid fever, and although she never fell ill herself with the disease, it's thought she inadvertently infected over 50 people with the disease through her work as a cook, some who went on to die. Following World War II, the island housed war veterans, but was later abandoned until the 1950s, when a centre opened to treat adolescent drug addicts. Soon rumours of ill treatment and cruelty to the addicts emerged, and by the early 1960s the facility was forced to close. The island was left deserted and became a bird sanctuary, and was permanently closed off to the public. Over 50 years later, the place is still deserted, but has become a magnet for urban explorers and ghost hunters. Most of the original hospital buildings still stand, but are massively deteriorated, and in danger of collapse. A thick forest conceals them, but they remain a haunting reminder of the suffering that was once endured there. It's hard to believe that an area so close to the bustling sophistication of New York City could be allowed to fall into such disrepair. In June 2009, North Brother Island featured in episode 8 of the Life After People series on the History Channel. It was used as an example of what would happen to structures after 45 years without humans. However, to this day, how and why this mighty complex was built is one of the most enduring mysteries of archaeology, and is likely to remain so for many years to come. Socotra. Located between the Guadalquivir Channel and the Arabian Sea is Socotra, one of the most isolated landforms on Earth of continental origin. It has a population of around 60,000, but is still something of an enigma, and has been described as the most alien place on Earth. It's also unique, as it has nearly 700 species of plants and wildlife that can be found nowhere else in the world, with an array of birds, reptiles and insects. And it's not just the flora and fauna that is unique. Some of the people who live there, notably the females, have mtDNA haplogroup N, a human gene also found nowhere else in the world. However, not all the inhabitants of Socotra are indigenous Socotri people. In recent years, a small number of black African people have moved to the island, some who are believed to be descendants of runaway slaves. Such is the importance of this ancient island and its endemic species, that in 2008 it was recognised as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Nan Madol. Nan Madol is located adjacent to the remote island of Pohnpei, one of the Federation states of Micronesia. The vast site consists of fallen temples, ancient tombs and bathhouses that were built on 92 man-made islets, stretching nearly a mile in length and a half-mile in width. The islets are surrounded by narrow channels of water that resemble canals. The name Nan Madol literally means space between. No one knows exactly how Nan Madol was built or why such an enormous task was undertaken, but islanders swear ancient kings used magic to build them. It's theorized that the huge basalt boulders, some as heavy as 50 tons, were transported to Nan Madol by rafts from the other side of the island and levered into place with palm tree trunks. No mortar was used to hold them together. It's estimated Nan Madol construction would have taken hundreds of years, and carbon dating indicates construction began around 1180 AD, and the site itself is thought to have been inhabited as far back as the 1st or 2nd century AD. It is known that Nan Madol was once the ceremonial and political seat of the Saudalor dynasty until about 1628, and later was a religious centre inhabited by the kings of Pohnpei. But the ancient city has no fresh water and was probably the reason it was eventually abandoned in the middle of the 19th century. The site is of such historical interest that many have labelled it the 8th wonder of the world, and compared the megalithic structures to the ceremonial squares built by the Mayans and Aztecs of Central America. It's also the only designated national historical landmark in the Federated States of Micronesia, and many believe the complex structures of Nan Madol are the remains of one of the lost continents of Lemuri. The mystery of the city has also inspired many books and artistic productions involving lost civilizations. However, to this day, how and why this mighty megalithic complex was built is one of the most enduring mysteries of archaeology, and is likely to remain so for many years to come. The disappearing crew of the KC Nicole. Just after midnight on April 11th, 1990, Nathan Neesmith, aged 32, his brother Billy Joe, 23, his nephew, 18-year-old Keith Wilkes, and their friend, 23-year-old Franklin Brantley, boarded a boat named KC Nicole and set off from McIntosh County Pier in Georgia on a 7-day commercial fishing trip. It was the first outing for the 34-foot boat since it had undergone extensive maintenance work. Around 3:30 AM the next morning, Nathan was at the helm of the boat steering it towards a reef so they could start fishing, when he realised there was something wrong with the vessel. She was heavy to manoeuvre and was ploughing through the waves rather than going over them. Nathan alerted the others who were sleeping, and further investigation showed that not only was there a mechanical issue with the boat, but it was also taking on a lot of water, and the cabin was rapidly filling. When they tried the bilge pumps, they were not working, so all 4 men attempted to scoop out the water using buckets. When this failed, they sent out a mayday over the radio, but received no response. Eventually, they decided to abandon ship, and with their life jackets on, they launched the inflatable lifeboat. But it was soon apparent there was a problem with the raft. Not only did it have a hole in it, but it was for 2 people, and there were 4 of them. The men had no choice but to stay with the raft, with 2 hanging off the side and 2 inside, but it was sinking fast. To try and keep it buoyant, they attached a hatch cover that was floating by. The 4 men clung to the cover in the hope that they would be seen by a passing boat. As it got light, they could see the Casey Nicole still half afloat in the distance, so Nathan, despite protests from the others, took the decision to swim to the stricken vessel to see if he could salvage anything and summons help. Now, this is where it gets a bit murky. Nathan claims that the Casey Nicole was about 3 miles away, and it took him around 7 hours to reach her. And when he got there it was dark, so he clung to her hull and waited until the next morning. He then claims he noticed a freighter in the area close to where the other 3 men were. He said the freighter was acting oddly and appeared to be going around in circles, stopping several times. This gave Nathan the impression that it was picking up his brother and the other 2 crew members. However, oddly, they didn't attempt to rescue him. Nathan claims he clung to the Casey Nicole until eventually he spotted a large bait box. He figured it was more stable than the upturned hull, and he clambered into it. He stayed in the box floating in the ocean for 3 days, clinging to life, and was finally rescued on April 16, 1990. He was starved, dehydrated, and in a bad way. He was taken to hospital, where he claims he heard voices whilst he was floating in the sea, and that's what kept him going. He was also shocked to learn that the 3 others hadn't been rescued, as he assumed they'd been picked up by the freighter. When it was realised there were still 3 crew members missing, a search party was sent out, but despite their extensive efforts, they were never found. Since the incident, speculation has been rife, in particular around Nathan's version of the events, and theories about what happened to the missing men are mixed. Some say Nathan's story is suspicious. After all, it does seem strange to abandon the others and swim for over 7 hours to reach a sinking boat hull. Others think the freighter story is far-fetched, and many speculate that Nathan is directly involved somehow. Some believe the 4 men may have been a part of a drug trafficking ring, but something went horribly wrong, or that the freighter was part of drug trafficking, and the crew took the men prisoner or killed them to keep them quiet. The men's family are convinced the 3 were taken prisoner by the crew of the freighter, and have been held in a foreign country, possibly Cuba, ever since. However, there is a strange twist to this mystery. In the weeks after the incident, Nathan's sister, Anenda, received a strange phone call from a man who spoke Spanish and seemed unable to understand English. The man just kept repeating Anna's phone number and saying her name before cutting off. That same day, an unusual call also came through to Doug Tyson, the owner of the Casey Nicole. Once again, the caller was a Spanish man, and according to Tyson, the only English word he knew was his name and his telephone number. Over the next year, 5 more calls came in, 3 to Anenda and 2 to Tyson. The last call was to Anenda on March the 6th, 1991. The caller spoke a single sentence in English: "I'm bringing him home." There have been no more calls. The family and Doug believe that this man was referring to one or more of the missing men, and they still hold out hope that they are alive somewhere. So what really happened to the lost crewmen of the Casey Nicole? Officially, Billy Joe Neesmith, Keith Wilkes and Franklin Brantley are now presumed dead, but unofficially it's entirely possible they may still be alive. What's your thoughts on this one? The disappearance of Yves Emmanuel Payne and Laurent Hanas. On December 22, 1991, at around 10 PM, A speeding car was pulled over by Officer Langer along a highway that led to the local marina in Goose Creek, South Carolina. Inside the car were 3 men, and Langer asked for their license and registration, but no one responded. After repeating the request, the man in the back seat said something in a foreign language to the driver that prompted him to hand over his papers. After checking the information, the officer told them to be on their way and to drive carefully, but again he received no response. The next day, while reading the newspaper, Langer was shocked to see photos of the 2 men he had pulled over the previous night. According to the paper, they were missing French sailors 37-year-old Yves-Emmanuel Payne and 25-year-old Laurent Hanaz, who had recently been the focus of an intense search by the United States Coast Guard. The report stated that the 2 sailors had been hired to deliver a French-made sailboat to its new owners. The vessel was a state-of-the-art catamaran worth nearly $250,000 and was the most sophisticated craft of its kind. It was fitted with high-tech navigational equipment, and its unique structure made it virtually unsinkable and undetectable to radar. The sailors' planned voyage was 2,500 miles from Maryland to the West Indies, but when the vessel failed to arrive as scheduled, the Coast Guard was notified. They searched for over 2 weeks, but there were no sightings of the boat along its sea course. Although strangely, the boat had been spotted a number of times several miles off course, in what is known as the Intracoastal Waterway, a protected inland passage that stretches thousands of miles from New England through Florida. It was a complete mystery what the boat was doing there. Further investigations revealed that a 3rd man had also been spotted on the catamaran, and the mysterious 3rd passenger was sighted by at least 5 different witnesses along the waterway. This led to speculation that perhaps one or both of the Frenchmen had been involved in stealing the boat, although their families and friends refused to accept that theory, claiming they would never be involved in anything criminal, and suggested instead that the 3rd man could have commandeered the boat and forced the 2 men to sail it. Others suggest that maybe they unintentionally sailed into Cuban waters and are being held in a Cuban prison, although this seems unlikely. Whatever the theories, Yves-Emmanuel Payne and Laurent Hanaz are still missing, and no sign of them or the catamaran have ever been found. However, perhaps the biggest mystery of all is what were they doing in a car with an unknown man weeks after they had been reported missing? Is it possible that they were being held against their will? Was their captor the man in the back of the car that Officer Langer pulled over? Or could they have fooled anyone and made off with $250,000 worth of a yacht? What do you think? Blue whales. We can't wait to talk about these guys, and we're probably going to do a documentary and some other videos on them because they're so fascinating. You probably won't believe this, but one of the biggest ocean mysteries is the blue whale, and it's remarkable that the largest animal on Earth can be so mysterious. We actually know more about the moon than we do about these. These spectacular giants of the sea inhabit most of the world's major oceans and are the largest animal to ever live on Earth, even larger than dinosaurs. And we have the privilege of sharing the planet with them. Just to give you a quick idea of how huge they are, they can weigh as much as 200 tons, or around 441,000 pounds. And their heart alone is as big as an average car, and its beat can be detected from 2 miles away. Their jawbone is as big as a telephone pole, and their tongue weighs as much as a small elephant. However, despite knowing their massive proportions, that is about all we know about them, and sadly, many of their measurements have derived from data collected from dead whales being killed by humans. For years, blue whales were hunted for their blubber and meat, and it drove these gentle giants to near extinction. And because it's believed that blue whales can live to over 100 years old, those living today may still remember being hunted by humans. Thankfully, this barbaric behaviour stopped in the 1970s, and blue whales are now protected, although their numbers have been slow to recover, mainly because as far as we know, they produce slowly and infrequently. A big reason we know so little about blue whales is their elusive nature, and no breeding ground has definitively been discovered yet, meaning scientists have no idea when they reach sexual maturity or the specifics of their reproduction. Although satellite tags have allowed scientists to track the movements of blue whales in the North Pacific and Indian Oceans, to date they are no nearer to finding out where they go to breed or what they do when they are deep below the water surface. However, what has been learnt in recent years is that blue whales will not just eat for the sake of it, and will pass up smaller meals in favour of a larger catch. They feed almost entirely on krill, tiny shrimp-like crustaceans that live throughout the world's oceans, and swim together in huge swarms. Take a look at this incredible footage of a blue whale feeding. With incredible drone shots like that, it's only a matter of time before these magnificent creatures reveal some of their secrets. And in 2017, a video was released of never-before-seen blue whale behaviour off the coast of Sri Lanka, claiming to show a mating ritual between a male and female blue whale. The video shows what they believe is a single male blue whale in pursuit of a female. Blue whales are sexually dimorphic, which means that females and males have noticeably physical characteristics. Females tend to be larger than males. The footage caused controversy among experts, many who didn't believe this was a mating ritual, although they did agree it was unusual to see blue whales acting in this way. For now, the mystery continues, and the blue whale remains one of the most well-known enigmas of the ocean, and we think that if these magnificent creatures want to keep their private life private, then it should stay that way. Daedalus sea serpent. We've all heard the tales of monster sea serpents spotted by delirious sailors during their voyages across the sea. Although in reality, it's likely many of these sightings are the result of overactive imaginations, drunkenness, or hallucinations. However, there was one incident involving the sea serpent that was considerably more credible than the others. It happened in 1848 and was witnessed by the crew of the British naval vessel Daedalus. And for years, the case has remained one of the most famous and puzzling maritime mysteries of all time. On August 6, 1848, at around 5 PM, the HMS Daedalus encountered what its captain, P. McKeague, described as an enormous sea serpent that was at least 60 feet long. The sighting occurred in the South Atlantic, around 300 miles from the coast of present-day Namibia. When the crew returned to shore, McKeague wrote a report and oversaw 3 professional drawings that depicted what he observed. And these were published in the Times newspaper and caused a bit of a controversy. An expert from the diary of another witness, Lieutenant E.A. Drummond, was also published that corroborated the incident. And another similar account was given by an anonymous officer who also witnessed the creature. This is what Captain McKeague wrote in his report. On our attention being called to the object, it was discovered to be an enormous serpent with head and shoulders kept about 4 feet constantly above the surface of the water, and as nearly as we could approximate, by comparing it with the length of what our main topsail yard would show in the water, there was at the very least 60 feet of the animal at sea level, no portion of which was to our perception used in propelling it through the water, either by vertical or horizontal undulation. It passed rapidly, but so close under our lee quarter, that had it been a man of my acquaintance, I should easily have recognised his features with the naked eye, and I did not, neither in approaching the ship or after it had passed our wake, deviate in the slightest degree from its course to the SW which it held on at peace from 12 to 15 miles per hour, apparently on some determined purpose. The diameter of the serpent was about 15 or 16 inches behind the head, which was, without any doubt, that of a snake, and it was never, during the 20 minutes that I continued in sight of our glasses, once below the surface of the water. Its colour dark brown, with yellowish white about the throat. It had no fins, but something like a mane of a horse, or rather a bunch of seaweed washed about its back. It was seen by the quartermaster, the boatswain's mate, and the man at the wheel, in addition to myself and officers above mentioned. Suggestions as to the identity of the entity range from a land snake swimming at sea to a surviving plesiosaur. However, it wasn't until 1997 that a very different drawing was released by a relative of Lieutenant Drummond. The never-seen-before drawing from his diary showed a slightly less dramatic image of the creature witnessed by the crew, and has provided important clues about what the serpent might be. The drawing shows what many believe is not a serpent at all, but a sei whale, a species of baleen whale that is huge, and the third largest after the blue whale, which can reach lengths of up to 64 feet. It's an easy mistake to make, as the sei has a flat triangular upper head and is reptilian in appearance and could easily be mistaken for the head of a snake. If you look at the sei whale feeding at the surface with its mouth open, it does look a little like the drawings. So is it possible this enduring sea serpent mystery is solved? Or is this still an unsolved ocean mystery? The crew of that boat all died thinking they had seen a sea serpent. But what do you think? The Cursed Ghost Ship of Fiji. The MV Jovita was a luxury yacht constructed in 1931 for movie director Roland West. At the time, the boat was unique. It had a completely wooden hull and was diesel powered, and was deemed to be unsinkable due to its solid wood construction, which made it extremely buoyant. West eventually sold the vessel in 1936 to a Milton E. Beacon, and after making numerous trips to Mexico, it was acquired by the US Navy in 1941. The Navy reconfigured the vessel and transformed it into patrol boat YP-108. Its duties during this time mostly consisted of patrolling the island of Hawaii until the end of World War II. After the war ended, the vessel was decommissioned and sold. Over the next few years, the MV Jovita changed hands several times until it ended up with a British-born sailor living in Samoa by the name of Captain Thomas H. Miller, who used it as a fishing charter and passenger boat. On October 3, 1955, the MV Jovita embarked on a routine merchant passenger run from the Samoan capital of Apia to the Tokelau Islands. On board were 25 passengers and crew, as well as 4 tons of cargo. That included medical supplies, timber, empty oil drums, and various foodstuffs. Prior to the trip, the ship had various setbacks, including the failure of its port engine clutch. But despite this not being properly repaired, the ship sailed away with only one working engine. Interestingly, this wasn't the first time bad luck had fallen the MV Jovita. During its days in the Navy, it had run aground and sustained heavy damage, and the boat had been considered unlucky amongst superstitious sailors. The trip was expected to take 2 days, but when the ship didn't arrive on time, it was initially thought it had been slowed down by the loss of one of its engines. But as the days stretched into weeks, the worst was feared, and the Royal New Zealand Air Force conducted an extensive search and rescue operation. However, despite scouring nearly 100,000 square miles of ocean, not a trace was found of the MV Jovita. Then, almost a month later, on November 10, 1955, the captain of merchant vessel Tuvalu spotted the missing Jovita off of the Fiji island of Vanua Levu. The boat was around 600 miles off course. As the Tuvalu approached, it was obvious there was no one aboard. The MV Jovita was floating aimlessly and listing heavily. When investigators boarded the ship, they discovered all the cargo was gone except the oil drums. The ship's 3 lifeboats were also missing, and the vessel was clearly in a bad way, with smashed windows and a hole in its hull that had led to heavy flooding of the lower deck. But investigators were baffled by some of the things they found. All of the lights in the cabins were on, as were the navigational lights, and all of the electrical clocks on board had stopped at 10:25, possibly due to the ship's generators cutting out at the time. The radio was functioning and was set to an international distress channel, although it appeared that the distress signal had never been sent. In the engine room, the starboard engine had been covered with mattresses, perhaps to try and plug a leak. The bilge pump was clogged up, and an auxiliary pump was rigged up but not connected to a power source. They also found a medical bag filled with bloodied bandages. The ship's logbook and navigational equipment was all missing, as well as several firearms that Captain Miller had kept on board. An inquiry was launched into the mysterious circumstances, but little was found to answer the question of what had happened, apart from the obvious damage to the ship and the flooding. Although it was revealed that Captain Miller had been transporting passengers with an elapsed license, and that there was not enough lifeboats to accommodate everyone on board, meaning that many of them almost certainly took to the water in life vests. In the end, the official inquiry deemed the disappearances as inexplicable. So just what happened to the 25 people on board? Well, one of the biggest mysteries is why they abandoned ship. After all, the MV Jovita was unsinkable, and proved that by being found still afloat. Listing or not, the Jovita was essentially still completely seaworthy. There was also still plenty of food and water on board. Another mystery is why the ship did not send out a distress signal when the equipment on board was in working order. Over the years, there have been many theories, and one enduring thought is that Captain Miller was killed or injured and was unable to command the ship, leaving the crew and passengers panicked in the face of the flooding, and therefore abandoning ship. It was revealed that Miller had a volatile relationship with his first mate, Chuck Simpson, and the two often fell out. They may have come to blows, and Miller was seriously injured or even killed. This may explain the bloodied bandages found in the medical kit. Another idea is that the ship was attacked by some outside force, possibly pirates, that caused the crew and passengers to flee the ship in a hurry. Although this seems very unlikely, as there was nothing on board that would be any value to pirates. Another theory is that the ship was captured by a Soviet submarine, and the crew and passengers were kidnapped. There was even speculation that there were still secret Japanese forces operating in the Pacific after World War II, perhaps unaware that the war had ended, and that these forces had set their sights on the boat. Of course, there are those that think the disappearances are likened to alien abductions or some other unknown force. However, in a strange twist of the story, in the years following the incident, it was reported that Captain Miller had been spotted alive in Singapore, the West Indies and Honolulu, promoting claims of an attempted insurance fraud. Although none of these claims have been proven, the sad reality is that if the passengers and crew were forced off the boat for whatever reason and took to the waters in life vests, it's likely that they either drowned or were eaten by sharks one by one. But not one single piece of evidence has ever been found to suggest that. So ultimately, we may never know what happened to the 25 people who felt the need to abandon a fully stocked, unsinkable ship and take to the sea that could be very likely their final resting place. The Tarahumara. Those who have read Christopher McDougall's best-selling book, Born to Run, will know all about the Tarahumara tribe. They call themselves Raramuri and are a community of indigenous people living in the state of Chihuahua in Mexico. The Tarahumara are shy, private people who live far apart from each other in small wooden houses and caves. They live a very simple life and are known to be quiet, thoughtful people who are able to farm. However, more interestingly, they are exceptional runners, and Raramuri, when translated, means running people. Their running abilities are almost superhuman and defy our understanding of human endurance. They regularly run up to 200 miles between settlements through mountain terrain, and it's believed their record run is over 400 miles in just over 48 hours. That's 16 times further than a marathon. They never seem to get tired or injured, and their running is done non-stop in either barefoot or sandals made from tires and deerskin. Many have entered long-distance running events, such as the 100 miles in Colorado, and they have dumbfounded fellow competitors by running in their sandals, often beating their rivals running in their high-tech trainers. To run these sorts of distances, you would think they must eat a ridiculous amount of food as they burn thousands of calories, but oddly enough, their diet is mainly corn, beans, potatoes and apples, and they brew their own alcoholic drink made from corn, which allegedly they will drink until they pass out. As well as being able to run long distances, the tribe have barely any illnesses, and things like cancer, diabetes and heart disease are basically non-existent. However, they do have an unusually high infant mortality rate, and apparently the average woman gives birth to around 10 babies, in hopes that 3 or 4 will survive into adulthood. It's thought that the Tarahumara can run these incredible distances because it's their tradition, as well as their only mode of transport, and they start running from a young age and continue up until their deaths. Their astonishing endurance has fascinated experts for years, who believe they are able to do this due to their environment, minimal footwear, and natural running form. One thing is for sure, the Tarahumara have shown us the capabilities of the human body, and they continue to fascinate us with their extraordinary ways. Sura people. The Suri, Mercy, and Mien are 3 tribes that live separately, but who are all collectively known as the Surma people. They live in South Sudan and Ethiopia and share similar cultures and beliefs. Their homes are built in remote mountainous areas, and they are known to have a fiery rivalry with neighbouring tribes. This rivalry has become more deadly in recent years, with all parties having access to automatic weapons. The areas where these tribes live is extremely dangerous for outsiders. They have a violent culture, and stick fighting is a common practice for the men. especially when providing their prowess when seeking a wife. It's not uncommon for them to suffer serious injury or even death in pursuit of a bride. The men shave their entire bodies and often wear little or no clothes. The women have an unusual beauty regime that starts from a young age. This involves having their bottom teeth removed and their lips pierced and stretched, in preparation for a clay lip plate to be inserted into their bottom lip. Some of these plates are a staggering 16 inches round, with the belief the bigger the plate, the more cattle the woman is worth, and the more attractive they are to potential suitors. Although in recent years it's thought this practice is not so common as it once was. They also use white clay paint to dot over their faces and paint their bodies. In a bizarre ritual of self-harm, the Suri people pride themselves on how many scars they have on their bodies. These self-inflicted wounds are performed by slicing their skin with a razor blade and a thorn. The open wound is then left to heal and scar. These rituals are extremely painful and thought to be a form of controlled violence, to help the children get accustomed to seeing blood and feeling pain, so that they can cope with their violent surroundings. Families live in communes that range from 40 to 1,000 people. They share food and livestock, and some of the elder men wear a fur crown, indicating that they are the most respected member of the tribe. The households, however, are always run by women, and they are allowed to earn their own money from the land they farm and own. Although all the decisions in the villages are made by men, and women have no say in these. The Ruk people. We have all heard of the Vietnam War, but many of us have not heard of the Ruk people. In fact, no one in the world had until the end of 1959, when North Vietnamese soldiers spotted a group of very timid, naked people in the woods. They could be seen climbing cliffs and trees with incredible agility, and after gaining the trust of the soldiers, some of them were persuaded out of their caves and huts and settled in Ruk Lane Valley. However, many of the Ruk people preferred to live their primitive lifestyle and opted to stay where they were, and today the Ruk people are considered one of the least known tribes in the world, and are still living in tents and caves beside the mountainside. They do not have schools, clinics or markets, or even family names. It's thought that they sleep sitting up, and have retained very strange witchcraft rituals which are foreign to other tribes. These include a fertility spell and a contraceptive spell, both of which are a complete mystery to outsiders. It's also thought that they have a secret sound that they will make that ward off wild animals. Unfortunately, it's feared that the Ruk people, who have lived very simple lives for many decades, are at risk of severe population decline as the elders die, taking their secret rituals with them. The younger members of the community are getting more and more drawn into the modern way of life, and it's thought that in under 100 years, the Ruk tribe will no longer exist. The Lone Tribesman. In 1996, the existence of an incredible lone tribesman came to light when loggers reported seeing a wild man lurking deep in the Amazon rainforest. The sighting led to investigations being carried out by Brazil's government agency responsible for looking after remote Amazon tribes. Officials at first were unable to trace him. However, there was evidence of a small thatched hut, with a garden growing modest crops surrounded by a number of spiked pitfalls, which are usually used for catching wild animals. They kept searching and found markings carved in trees that seemed to have some unknown spiritual meaning. After entering the hut, they found hand-carved arrowheads and torches, and it became apparent to investigators that the man was living alone, and it was concluded that he was the last surviving member of an unknown tribe. As more searches were carried out throughout the forest, more of the dwellings were found, characterized by a hand-dug rectangular hole, in the middle of them about 5 feet deep. It didn't appear to serve any purpose, and had never been documented in any other tribes in the area. The lone man became known as the Man in the Hole. It was thought that he moved between his shelters, possibly on the run from the outside world. Eventually he was located, but he made it very obvious that he did not want contact with anyone, and on one occasion he fired an arrow that hit an investigator in the chest. The investigator survived the attack, but it was decided to back off and give the tribesman space to live his life as he wished. The decision was also made to make a 31 square mile area surrounding where the man was living off limits to any kind of development or intrusion from the outside world. And although he was avoided contact for decades, he is monitored by Brazilian's protection agency, and they occasionally leave him tools and seeds. He is well aware of them and has learned to trust them as long as they keep their distance. In 2018, FUNAI released a video of him to raise global awareness of the threats to the uncontacted people in Brazil. In the video, the man, now believed to be in his 50s, appears to be strong and healthy. Take a look at this extraordinary footage. It seems incredible that at this moment in time, this lone tribesman is still roaming the forest, hunting and living in complete isolation, with no one to talk to apart from the animals and his own mind. It's likely that this is how he will live for the rest of his life, and will take to his grave the knowledge of what happened to his people, and the secrets of his culture and language. Korawai people. The Korawai tribe are different from many known tribes. They live in a remote rainforest in southeastern West Papua in the Indonesian province of Papua, and it's thought that up until 1970 they were totally unaware of the existence of other people apart from rival tribes. They live in unique tree houses that tower above the forest, resting on spindly wooden stilts over 1,000 foot above the ground, with no cranes or use of modern machinery. These incredible structures are built entirely by hand, using primitive handmade tools. The towering ladder is constructed to reach their homes, and the houses have walls and floors made of tree bark, and roofs made of leaves. The original reason and design purpose of these dwellings was to protect them from rival tribes and cannibalism. The tribe have maintained their age-old traditions and the strong belief that their dead ancestors can return to living at any moment. Many of them have had very little contact with the outside world, and most of the Korawai tribe still live with little or knowledge of other humans. It's widely been reported that the tribe still practice cannibalism, although in recent years it's thought this practice has diminished. In 2016, Australian reporter Paul Raphael from Smithsonian Magazine went on an expedition to meet the tribe, and he claims when he first encountered them, he had to eat human meat to gain their acceptance. He was also presented with the skull of a tribesman who had recently been killed, and whose brains the tribe had dined on. The tribe also believe that if someone dies of disease or unknown reasons, it is likely the witchman Kakua is responsible, and he has possessed their body and eaten their insides. The Kakua will be a member of the tribe, and if they find out who it is, they will kill them and eat them. Supposedly, they will only eat men, and although it's hard for us to understand, in their culture it's perfectly normal. The Korawai still live in a remote rainforest, and are one of the world's most mysterious and isolated tribes. The San Pedro Mummy. In July 1934, Cecil Main and Frank Carr were digging for gold in the San Pedro Mountains when they discovered something quite extraordinary. After blasting the rock face, they uncovered a small man-made cavern measuring no more than 15 feet long and 4 feet wide. Inside it, sitting cross-legged, was a tiny mummified human, measuring around 6.5 inches in its sitting position. He was perfectly preserved with brown, wrinkled flesh, bulging eyes, and a flattened skull. Even his fingernails were visible. Main and Carr immediately smelt money, and they removed the tiny figure and took him to the town of Casper, where they sold him as a sideshow exhibit. Over the next couple of years, he passed through several owners who made money from him, and became known as Pedro. Eventually Pedro ended up in the hands of car dealer Ivan Goodman, who showed the mummy off in a glass case as part of his advertising display. He claimed Pedro was thousands of years old and displayed X-ray photos next to him to substantiate this. Of course, the claim was nonsense, but the X-rays were genuine, as Pedro had been examined by scientists over the years, and all of them agreed that the mummy was a genuine human specimen. However, none of them could determine exactly what he was. One theory is that he was in fact a baby suffering from a rare genetic condition known as anencephaly, an embryonic development fault that means a major portion of the brain, skull and scalp is missing. However, there is a problem with this suggestion, because although Pedro was the right size to be a baby, he also exhibited features associated with a fully grown man. For instance, he had a full set of teeth, and x-rays revealed he had the remains of solid food in his stomach. It's also thought that he did not die of natural causes, as he had a broken collarbone, damaged spine, and a smash in his skull. Other theories claim Pedro was in fact an adult dwarf. The popular belief from local Native Americans is that Pedro was a Niminagara, a mythical race of little people who lived in the Wind River. They were said to be between 2 and 3 feet in height and possessed magical powers. But they were also extremely vicious, and it was unwise to upset one, as they could fire poisonous darts at anyone who displeased them. Sadly, modern scientists never got a chance to study Pedro, as in the 1950s, Goodman lost him, probably to a New York conman, and the mummy has never been recovered. The incredible Shigye Idol. The Shigye Idol is the oldest known wooden sculpture in the world and dates back 11,500 years. It was discovered on January 24, 1894 in the peat bog of Shigye, on the eastern slope of the Middle Urals in Russia. Excavation of the area had begun 40 years earlier after the discovery of a variety of prehistoric objects. The sculpture was found 13 feet down in the bog and was extracted in 10 parts. When reassembled, it stood at 2.8 meters in height, although some suggested its original height could have been around 5.3 meters. Initially it was dated at around 9,500 years old, but this was revised in the 1990s to 11,500, meaning it was made shortly after the end of the last ice age during the Mesolithic period. The sculpture is carved from larch, and it's believed stone tools, as well as tools made from the lower jawbone of a beaver, were used to carve its intricate markings. At the top of the sculpture is a head with a face, eyes, nose and mouth. The body is flat and is decorated with geometrical motifs and human faces and hands. The lines in the middle are believed to represent ribs. The unusual decoration has been likened to a totem pole. Theories about what the carvings represent range from illustrations of our creation to a navigational aid or even mythological forest spirits. Some have suggested that the idol is a warning not to enter a dangerous area. Because the statue was buried in the bog for so long, it's incredibly well preserved, as the acid environment killed off microorganisms and also had a tanning effect. Scientists suspect that many statues like this one existed, but they did not benefit from the preservation effect of the bog. To date, Shigye Idol's purpose and meaning remains a mystery, but it could also very well hold a vital clue to life nearly 12,000 years ago. The precious idol is currently kept in a climate-controlled case at the Sverdlovsk Regional History Museum in Russia. The Terracotta Warriors of China. Most of us are aware of the ancient Egyptians' belief in the afterlife and the complex after-death rituals they followed to ensure the deceased had all they needed to complete their journey. But they weren't the only ones who followed fascinating burial rituals. China also adopted age-old burial rituals themselves, and the extent they went to protect one of their emperors was accidentally unearthed in 1974 and became one of the most significant archaeological finds of the 20th century. It all started back in 246 BCE when China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, took the throne at the age of just 13. As ruler of the First Imperial Empire, he was responsible for regulating scripts and coins, and was also instrumental in the construction of the Great Wall and the unification of China. To recognize his own achievements and memorialize his life, he ordered the construction of a necropolis in Xi'an, a region rich in gold. His vision was an elaborate mausoleum filled with the most treasured possessions. He also instructed that thousands of specially made terracotta soldiers were created to protect him in the afterlife. For centuries, Qin Shi Huang's massive underground mausoleum remained undetected. However, in 1974, workers in northwestern China stumbled upon a large sculpture of a terracotta warrior while digging a well. The discovery prompted archaeologists to explore the area, resulting in the discovery of thousands of similar soldiers in 4 separate pits. Each life-sized soldier was unique with an impressive amount of detail, and they varied in height according to their military rank. Upon discovery, all the figures were the same shade of grey, but originally they would have been realistically painted. In addition to the 8,000 soldiers, 130 ceramic chariots and 670 horses were also found, along with clay figures of dancers, acrobats and musicians. Today, Qingxihuang's necropolis is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, although the main part of the tomb has not been excavated. Most of the thousands of terracotta soldiers still remain on the site, guarding over their ruler, although 10 have been removed and have appeared in exhibitions, allowing visitors to see up close the intricate work that went into each soldier, and give them an insight into not only early artistic practices, but also ancient Chinese burial rituals. Bosnian Sphere. In March 2016, a massive stone ball was discovered in the forest of Visco Valley in Bosnia. It measured around 10 feet across and was brown and red in colour. The find caused a massive debate in academic circles as to how such a vast, perfectly spherical stone, weighing over 30 tons, was created. Archaeologist Sam Samira Osmanakic, who discovered the stone, believes a long-lost ancient civilization created the huge ball thousands of years ago, and that other similar spherical stones found around the world back this up. He claimed their technology was different to ours, and they knew the power of geometrical shapes, demonstrated with the pyramids and other perfectly formed ancient constructions. He also claims that certain hills in the Bosnian Visoko Valley, Herzegovina, harbour ancient underground tunnels and pyramids. However, it's worth pointing out there is no geological proof of this. But others disagree and believe the logical explanation for the huge sphere is an example of something called concretion, a compact, often spherical rock mass that forms from the precipitation of natural mineral cement in the spaces between particles. Typically, these structures are rich in iron and take on a reddish-brown appearance. Examples of such a phenomena have been found all around the world, such as the Moiraki boulders of New Zealand and the concretions of the Theodore Roosevelt National Park in North Dakota. And, rather than them being thousands of years old, these formations are actually millions of years old. However, there are some that agree with Sam and point out the stone spheres of the Dicras people found in Costa Rica. These spheres are made of gabbro, which is a volcanic rock that would not naturally form in such a perfectly sphere shape, and so have been man-made and strategically placed in rows at specific settlements, bearing in mind they weigh up to 15 tons. So to date, the jury is still out on whether these spherical objects were handmade by a lost civilization or Mother Nature's handiwork. What do you think? Gråball Man. The body of the Gråball Man was discovered on 26th of April 1952 by a team of peat diggers working near the village of Gråball in Denmark. After extensive tests, it was estimated the body dated back to the late 3rd century BC, during the early Germanic Iron Age, and he had died after having his throat cut. It is believed his death was an example of human sacrifice, possibly an important rite in Iron Age Germanic paganism. The find had been described as one of the most spectacular discoveries from Denmark's prehistory, because it's one of the most exceptionally preserved bog bodies in the world. It was so well preserved, even the man's fingerprints have been retrieved. Studies of his remains revealed valuable information about the man's life and his gruesome death. His hands were smooth, indicating that he was not employed in hard labour, such as farming. His teeth and jaws indicated that he had suffered from periods of starvation and poor health during his early childhood, and his skeleton showed signs of significant calcium deficiency and the early onset of spinal degeneration. However, due to the shrinkage of the corpse suffered in the bog, the man's actual height could not be determined. Although it's known in life he had dark hair, not the reddish colour it now appears. The corpse was not found with any artifacts or clothing, suggesting he was naked at the time of his death. His throat was cut ear to ear, severing his trachea and esophagus. This was too deep to be a self-inflicted wound. Adding weight to the sacrifice theory, He was around 30 years old when he died. It was decided initially that the corpse should undergo immediate preservation and then be exhibited to the public, but this was a mistake as mould started to appear on certain areas of his body as a result of having been kept permanently moist. After a rethink, it was decided the body should go through a tanning process to in effect turn it into leather before being stuffed with oak bark. This was the first time a whole bog body had been preserved, a bit of an unceremonious way to treat a human body, but the Grobel man has provided valuable information into life over 2,000 years ago, and he lives on at the Moosgaard Museum near Aarhus, where he is still displayed today. Dragon Blood Trees of Socotra Island. The Dracaena cinnabari, or dragon blood tree, is native to Socotra Island, an island off the coast of Yemen and Somalia. The dragon blood tree acquired its mysterious name and reputation by its excretion of blood-red sap when it's damaged. According to local legend, the first dragon blood tree was created from the blood of a dragon after losing a battle with an elephant. The sap is believed to have magical and medicinal properties and is still used today for these purposes. The dragon's blood sap is said to protect and ward off negative energies and is sprinkled throughout homes, especially under rugs, on windowsills or in doorways. The sap is also known as a cure-all for illness and contain all matter of anticoagulant and antiviral properties. It's even specifically been used for lowering fever and curing diarrhea, ulcers, and eczema. The dragon blood tree is just one of many species who uniquely thrive on Socotra Island, an island that has been likened to an alien planet or lost world because of its unique natural wonders. It's estimated that about 37% of its plant species, 90% of its reptile species, and 95% of its land snail species living on this ancient island survive nowhere else on Earth. A luminous tree in the United States. In 1885, the Theophysis Journal reported that near to some hot springs in Tuscarora, Nevada, an eerie, photophorescent tree had been discovered. A closer examination revealed that the tree was covered with a luminous, gummy substance that had an unpleasant odour. The mysterious tree emitted enough light to be seen from up to a mile away at night, and up close was bright enough to read with. Local Native Americans were very wary of the tree and would not go near it, even during the day, and referred to it as a witch tree. No one seems to know for sure how or why this tree became covered in this luminous substance, although some believe it was the result of some sort of supernatural intervention. However, the more plausible explanation is it was linked to the nearby hot spring waters. Sadly, the tree no longer exists, and is believed to have died naturally, although the story has inspired a Dutch company called Alumen, whose vision it is to create glow-in-the-dark trees to replace traditional street lighting. They plan to achieve this by isolating genes that cause creatures to glow and genetically engineering them into trees so that they glow too. The whistling trees of Nubia. The rustling of trees and creaking of branches is a familiar sound if you live near a forest. However, trees that whistle is a less common phenomenon, unless you live along the Nile River in the country of Nubia. 100 years or so ago, where the African winds brought with them the mysterious music of whistling trees. Documented by various publications as early as 1889 and as recent as 1943, the most common explanation for these whistling trees was that insects had burrowed into the branches, making small holes that allowed the wind to pass through and produce these curious whistling sounds, much like a woodwind instrument. However, what is curious is that no other trees in this area, or any other area for that matter, have ever duplicated this whistling effect, even though insect infestations of trees is a fairly common occurrence. Posing the question, why just these trees at this time? Is it merely an example of another parasitic relationship in nature? Was it something that was blown out of proportion, or was there a supernatural force at work that orchestrated the mystical notes of these whistling trees? What do you think? The snake tree of Mexico. In the March 30th, 1901 edition of the Musselbrook Chronicle, there was a report of a mysterious 20-foot high tree that was as disturbing in its nature as it was astonishing. This unusual tree, near to the Sierra Madre Mountains in Mexico, was named the Snake Tree, not because of snakes being attracted to it or inhabiting it, but because of its grotesque snake-like branches that twisted and contorted in a continuous motion. Horrifically, upon closer inspection, it was confirmed that this carnivorous tree was consuming birds or any creatures that had the misfortune of landing on it. The limbs of this predatory tree were described as being more like tentacles and were completely covered with tiny suckers that aided it with capturing and holding its prey long enough to suck it completely dry of blood. It's believed that the snake tree of Mexico no longer exists today, and there have been no other known reports of a tree of this kind. The electric trees of New Guinea. Lieutenant von Immergessendi may have experienced the shock of his life when he and other members of his German expedition discovered electric trees while exploring a remote area of New Guinea in 1885. According to von Immer's account, one of the other members of the expedition carelessly decided to chop at one of these mysterious trees with an axe, and was sent backwards from a massive electric shock. Von Immer stated, every branch and every twig of the tree presented similar ridges and cores, with the addition of a thicker central one, and I quickly proved that the current circulated through the entire system. How it is kept up, no one at present can tell, but there it is. I am not able to say what the intensity or the quantity of the current might have been, but it was enough to knock you down in a very unpleasant way. The expedition was reported to have ended earlier than planned due to sickness of the members. However, on his return, von Immer claimed that he had samples of the tree's wood, core and seeds. Although close to a century and a half after his return, no further documentation has been given of these electric trees, and they are now believed to have been lost in history. Kate. This next photograph was submitted to our website. We've changed the names of the people involved in the story, and have spoken to the poster to ask permission to use the image in this video. We'll call her Kate, and here is the story behind the image. In November 2013, Kate and her family and friends took a day trip to Savannah, Georgia. Kate's mum and two of her friends decided to split off from the main group to do a walking tour of Savannah's historical buildings. During the tour, they took a break from walking in Johnson Square, an area that dates back to 1733. The tour group was standing around in a circle when Kate's mum noticed an old man and a little girl, no older than 5 years old, sitting on a marble bench that was a monument to a famous singer named Johnny Mercer. The pair were less than 50 feet away from them. Kate's mum, who we'll call Sally, was instantly struck by the little girl because of her beautiful white dress, black dress shoes, fur coat, and the way she laid on the bench in the fetal position. The little girl must have sensed that the pair was staring at her as she immediately rose to attention, crawled off the bench, and began playfully skipping towards the tour group. Although she kept a safe distance from the pair, they could tell that she was intrigued by them. After a few moments, the little girl retreated towards a garden in front of one of the estates and crouched in amongst the tall grass and trees. Seeing a great photo opportunity, Sally pulled out her phone and took a photo of the little girl. It wasn't until later that afternoon, when the family and friends regrouped, that Sally and her friends began discussing the little girl and how pretty she was, her strange behaviour, and how the old man on the bench, who they assumed was the little girl's guardian, didn't seem to acknowledge her wandering off and playing in the garden. They then looked at the photo they had and were shocked to see not the pretty little girl they remembered, but a girl with a hollow face, sunken eyes and nose that appeared to look like 3 black holes. Take a look at the photo. The family have shown the photograph to various people, and some believe the sunken face and features are an optical illusion caused by shadows from the trees above her. However, that still doesn't explain the little girl's clothing, her strange behaviour, and the old man she was sitting with. After doing a little research, it was discovered Johnson Square has a child ghost named Gracie Watson, or Little Gracie. She was the daughter of the manager of the Pulaski House Hotel, which was located just off Johnson Square, but has since been demolished. Gracie loved being the centre of attention and would entertain hotel guests at the hotel and tourists in Johnson Square. In 1889, tragically, she died of pneumonia, aged just 6, and her parents buried her in a nearby cemetery and commissioned a marble statue of the child in her memory. Since her death, visitors of the cemetery and Johnson Square have seen a little girl in a white dress playing by herself and on occasion interacting with tourists. She is supposedly a very friendly ghost, so is this the photo of little Gracie? What do you think? The Wheaton Bandit. This next image is a series of photographs of an unidentified bank robber known as the Wheaton Bandit. Between 2002 and 2006, he was suspected of being responsible for up to 16 armed robberies in the Wheaton, Illinois area. At the time of the offences, it was thought he was around 25 to 35 years old. During the robberies, he always wore a hood or ski mask, and carried his gun in a distinctive way, with his trigger finger placed along the side of the gun in a safety position rather than on the trigger, suggesting he had law enforcement or military training. He also changed his clothing for each attack, and it was believed he wore a bulletproof vest. As well as the photos of him in a mask, there are also at least 2 possible photos of him without a face covering. These were captured in December 2004, when an unidentified man entered a Mid-America bank in Glen Allen without carrying out any transaction, but he was caught on the bank's security cameras. 2 weeks after the sighting, in January 2005, the Wheaton Bandit robbed the bank. Again in November 2006, a witness spotted a suspicious man in the parking lot of the Fifth Third Bank 1 hour before it was robbed. This witness helped the police draw a composite sketch of the suspicious person. It must have been pretty accurate, because after the sketch was released to the public in December 2006, the robberies abruptly stopped. However, despite a reward of $50,000 offered for information about the robber, nothing ever materialised, and he was never caught. And as of December 2011, the 5-year statute of limitations on the bank robbery charges ran out, meaning he was officially off the hook, and unless the Wheaton Bandit starts robbing banks again, he is now beyond the reach of the law. The Leather Man of New York. This photo, taken in June 1885, was of a mysterious vagabond who for several years travelled a circuit between the Connecticut River and the Hudson River in New York. The route was a 365-mile trip, and he repeated it continually from around 1857 to 1889. The mysterious traveller earned the nickname Leatherman as he was dressed head to toe in handmade leather clothes. He was of unknown origin, although he spoke fluent French and broken English, leading many to believe he was French-Canadian. He communicated mostly with grunts and gestures and rarely spoke, but on the odd occasion when he did, if asked about his background, the conversation would abruptly end. He was a well-known and frequent visitor to various towns on his route and returned to each town every 34 to 36 days, stopping now and then to buy food and supplies, although it's unknown how he earned his money. He lived in rock shelters along his route and survived blizzards and other foul weather by heating them with fire. They later became known as Leatherman Caves. Because of the route he took, that included towns that were exempt from the state tramp law passed in 1879, he was free to roam, although he was arrested at the request of the Connecticut Humane Society in 1888, and was hospitalised, but was found to be sane except for an emotional affliction, and was released to carrying on his nomadic life. He ultimately succumbed to mouth cancer, and his body was found on March the 24th, 1889. Along the possessions found with him was a French prayer book. He was buried near Route 9, and his grave inscription read, "Final resting place of Jules Burgley." But this identification was incorrect, and investigators revealed his death certificate had no name, and his identity was unknown. It was later decided that his body should be exhumed and moved back from the road. But when they dug up the grave, there was no trace of Leatherman's remains, only some coffin nails, which were reburied in a new pine box, along with dirt from the old gravesite. The new tombstone, installed on May the 25th, 2011, simply reads, "The Leatherman." Part of the reason for the exhumation process was to test his remains to determine his origins. Johnny Lee Mills. Johnny Lee Mills was an alias used by an unidentified teenage male who was arrested in St. Louis in 1990 on suspicion of being a runaway. He ran away from the youth shelter before his identity could be confirmed, and all the information he did give, including his name, age, and other details, turned out to be false, and his true identity has never been discovered, and to this day it's unknown what happened to him. As well as using the name Johnny Lee Mills, he also used the names Steve Johnson and Randy Smith. It's feared that due to the lifestyle he led, he may have met with foul play, and may even be one of the unidentified bodies found every year across the country. While in police custody, he claimed to work the truck stops, which might indicate involvement in sex work. It's said, it's sad to think no one reported him missing, and this case is now considered closed by law enforcement. It would be nice to believe that he is still alive and was reunited with his family or guardians. Although the case is closed, this hasn't stopped speculation that he is possibly the 1992 St. Louis John Doe, a young man who was found murdered in Missouri in 1992, whose identity has been unknown for over 26 years. Obviously, if any of you can shed any light on who he is or his fate, I'm sure the St. Louis Police Department would be pleased to hear from you. The Ape Man of Brazil. This next case is a little bit strange, and it's more than likely a fake, but because the photograph is very old, and not privy to modern techniques of faking, we thought we'd feature it to see what you made of it. The photograph was taken in the 1930s and published in the Dutch magazine Het Leven in 1937, under the headline Mysterious Ape Man, amid claims that the half-man, half-monkey was discovered in Brazil's Amazon jungle. The groundbreaking story made the rounds of the world at the time, and convinced many that there had been a monkey man living in the Amazon jungle. A Swiss billionaire who was on an expedition to Brazil even boasted that he caught a monkey man and killed him, but was unable to bring the body back to prove it. The story was largely forgotten about until the photograph resurfaced online in 2012. Many modern-day observers claim to have spotted tall tale signs of prosthetic makeup on his face, and point out that he is remarkably clean-shaven and well-groomed for a wild creature caught in the jungle, and that the ape man's mouth and brow are stuck into place using crude makeup techniques. Others believe that the ape man is most likely an unfortunate individual born with birth defects, and exploited to wear the makeup and prosthetics, to pose and pretend to be a newly discovered species. However, there are still those that want to believe in the existence of the ape man, and throughout the 20th century and into the 21st, reports of wild and mythic ape-like beasts living in remote and far-flung locations have fascinated people across the world. So what do you think? Is the photograph a tragic exploitation of a disabled human being, a fake, or was he really an unknown hominid discovered in the Amazon jungle in the 1930s?